בחרמון נמס השלג בחצי הלילה, בחרמון זורם לו פלג בחצי הליל. אבא שם על הר השלג בחצי הלילה, שר שירים על נס בפלא עם כל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. בבקעת תמר פורח בחצי הלילה, הירח שם זורח בחצי הליל. שם אחי ודאי שומע בחצי הלילה את שירנו השמח כאן בישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. במדבר הולך החושך בחצי הלילה, שקט הס בארץ גושן בחצי הליל. לדודי עיני נחושת בחצי הלילה, וגם הוא חוגג כמו שכל בית ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. ואני יושב בבית בחצי הלילה, עם נרות וגביע יין בחצי הליל, וכוכב מאיר עיניים בחצי הלילה, לי מוסר ברכת שמיים ולכל ישראל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. האביב שוב צוהל ואיתי משתולל, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה לילה, איזה ליל. שוב צוהל.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар.
Future
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 983 of the news. It's good to see you all once again, and today we're hearing that Iran is committed to attacking Israel very soon, and also North Korean troops are deployed to the Ukrainian front line, according to recent intelligence. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we've gotten very large news today that the Israelis have conducted a naval invasion into the northern area of Lebanon to seize and capture key Hezbollah strongpoints, and not only that, Hezbollah and IRGC high-value personnel that are involved in coordinating the ground operations through the Iranian government. We were able to hear that this operation was successful today, and that Israeli commandos were able to capture some of these key figures. At the same time, we were also able to see that anti-drone measures were being conducted within the area of northern Israel, as we were able to see that an Israeli Apache, also called, I believe, a P-10, was capable and able to shoot down a Hezbollah drone that was launched over the border today on film. Meanwhile, we are also getting additional picture and video evidence showing the arrival of the B-52H Stratofortress bombers from United States Air Command into the United States Central Command, and we are also getting information once again that the Iranians are poised to strike and will be striking at just about any moment. While I sit there and almost choke on my spit. At the exact same time, in the Korean Peninsula, we have been able to hear that the South Koreans are weighing every single option possible for a response to North Korea, including direct armed responses or responses in supporting the Ukraine war, as almost a large proxy conflict in between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Republic of Korea to the south. Meanwhile, inside of East Europe, we've also been able to see that heavy actions have been continuing today, with the Russian Federation taking some significant hits around the area area of Oryol, although we do not know the actual targets of these strikes and the actual damage caused. The reports of the explosions were very large, and we are assuming that significant damage has been made. Meanwhile, inside of the city of Moscow, we have also been able to hear that Vladimir Putin is beginning to insist that the T-90M Pravory, not the T-14 Armata, is truly the greatest main battle tank on Earth, and every time one arrives on the battlefield, the entire battlefield is won immediately by the Russians, and the FSB posts a brand new calendar. We were also able to hear that inside of the Russian Federation, things are, of course, not really doing all too well today, but inside the Ukrainian front lines, things are exceedingly not doing that well, with Ukrainian defensive efforts around the area of Vovchansk and the Kharkiv region resulting in incredibly high losses for Russian armed forces today. We have also been able to see that heavy defensive actions have been taken around the town of Pokrovsk, and even some counter offensives have been occurring by Ukrainian forces around the area of Chasiv Yar as well as Kremenna, as Ukrainian forces have been seeking to drive the Russian Federation back from the key defensive positions of Torske and Chasiv Yar over the past week. We have also been getting a couple of other interesting pieces of news from around the world, but once again, today is a fairly significant news day out of the entire week. And so moving on into our first bit of news for the night, we are going to be moving on down into the area of Lebanon, as the Israeli ground operation is continuing to grind forward within the southern area of the country, with the Israeli armed forces planning on still largely debilitating or completely destroying the ability for the Iranians to control and operate Hezbollah, and also to completely wipe out Hezbollah as an active combatant force within the region. We've been able to see that these efforts have been going successfully, according to reports, the limited ones that we get from the ground, but nevertheless, an incredibly interesting operation has occurred today way from the southern area south of the Litani River and all the way up north of Tripoli, from what we understand. Tripoli is a very interesting city in Lebanon, and it's actually not the original city that would have held this name, because many of y'all would know, if you're from the United States Marine Corps, that in the Marines hymn it says from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. It's not speaking about this Tripoli in Lebanon, it's actually speaking about the Tripoli all the way over here inside of Libya. That's the actual Tripoli that they're speaking of, because that one was the one that we actually pretty much burned the entire port down in during the Battle of the Barbary Wars, the first and second one. But moving on from that, however, in that small fact, just to make sure to clarify which Tripoli this really is, just north of that, in an unidentified location that the Israelis have not specifically stated, but they have told us this has happened, a naval invasion did occur by Israeli commandos within the area, intent on capturing and creating a small beachhead to destroy a largely Hezbollah and IRGC intelligence outpost, and not only that, to also try and capture the key figures that apparently were operating from this base. We were able to see some limited video and picture evidence that came out from this raid today, or as it could be called, a naval invasion, and it does appear that the Israeli commandos were able to claim a success. We were able to see this on CCTV footage from the area just north of Tripoli. Here's the footage. We can see a building quietly sitting in the night near to the shoreline of Lebanon in its northernmost region. And right here we can see someone riding on a scooter or something like that. They were almost like a ghost on Paranormal Activity. Well, you then see a larger group of men coming out of that building over there. And it looks as though those are the Israeli commandos. What do you know? It's crazy. They just show up out of the blue like that.
Riding on a scooter? Man, that's crazy.
Man, I don't think that was one of the guys in the Israeli commandos. I think that was just some dude passing by. But we can see the Israeli commandos moving forward. We can actually see that they did capture one of the key members at this installation. We're not exactly sure if he's affiliated directly with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or whether he's related to the Hezbollah armed forces that are currently fighting in the south that have been heavily beaten by the Israelis, at least as far as the decapitation strikes have been concerned. Regardless, it appears that the Israelis may be able to gain some higher amounts of intelligence off of this capture of this figure today, and it also appears that the Israeli commandos that conducted this naval invasion were able to cause significant damage to the structure, according to Israeli reports, which has pretty much knocked out its usefulness for Hezbollah and IRGC forces within the northern area of Lebanon. And we can see an endless stream of commandos coming out of that building. It's literally endless.
Man, how many do they need? Like, one commando of the Israelis is very, like, potent on its own, but damn, man, this is like a whole contingent.
And yeah, it was a massive amount. I would say at least a platoon or something along those lines. It was an insanely large number. But nevertheless, what's interesting about this is that the Israeli Navy is not really that large. Like, it is a fairly significant navy, at least for the size of the state of Israel, but it's not a wildly massive kind of a navy, just to put that out there. And we can actually show y'all a list of the active ships in the Israeli Navy, because the Israelis were very quiet about this raid that was conducted. We got a very minimal public statement from the Israeli Ministry of Defense, and really the only proof we have of this naval invasion was actually from inside of Lebanon, with the CCTV footage that was captured of the Israeli Navy commandos in operation after they had made shorefall. From what we understand, the size of this force was most likely not brought into the area by submarine. Many people may know this. This is actually an interesting fact. Submarines are involved in a large amount of covert operations, but usually the teams that these submarines can carry largely depend on their size, and from what we know, the Israelis largely only have, from what we understand, fairly small coastal patrol submarines like the Dakar class right here, which I believe is based off of the Type 212 or something along those lines. But let me see if I can actually get y'all a decent look at one of the active submarines in the Israeli Navy, like this one right here. These are largely coastal patrol submarines, and while incredibly deadly and very dangerous to most armed forces when they're reaching the coastline of Israel, these things really do not have the carrying capacity to carry a large load of special forces. So for this reason, we believe that the Israeli commandos, while I have an incredibly hard time talking tonight, were not dropped off by Israeli patrol submarines. We have a larger understanding that they were most likely dropped off by the surface fleet, some sort of a R5 or a 4 destroyer or a frigate that transported them into the area, and then they made their way to shore on multiple rib vessels or boats for the large part. They then dismounted the boats, moved inland, created a small beachhead, and then destroyed the location and then captured the forces that were involved. Overall, from what we've heard, the operation has been a complete success and is the first time so far in this conflict that we've ever seen the Israelis conduct a naval landing or a naval invasion anywhere within Lebanon. So it's a first in many ways, and of course, hopefully we'll be seeing that it has a lot more value than just the fact it was the first naval landing to ever be conducted so far in the conflict. Moving on from that, however, we did see that Hezbollah, with the limited amount of forces and resources that we understand they have at the moment, is continuing to try and conduct strikes against northern Israel. We were able to see that yesterday the Hezbollah forces were able to conduct some form of a strike against the area of Carmel with a Grad launcher that they apparently had at their disposal. We don't really know how they had it. It looked fairly modernized. It may have actually been provided quite recently by the Syrians or the Russian military, or maybe even directly by Iran. We're not entirely sure as to the source of that MLRS launcher, but nevertheless, Hezbollah does have a large number of drones and unguided rockets that are available at its disposal that have been provided by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And the Hezbollah forces, while largely lacking a well put together command structure, are still continuing to try and conduct some offensive actions against Israel in some form, including the launching of drones as per usual. Most of y'all have seen the drones before, but we did get to see a first down in Israel. We actually saw a little while ago that a first was conducted by the Ukrainians as a Ukrainian Mi-24 successfully shot down a Shahed 136 drone over Ukraine, which is the first time ever that we've seen a helicopter in any conflict, at least on film, directly shoot down an unmanned aerial vehicle with its main gun, and that was the first in history, at least in the entire world, and specifically in Ukraine. It appears that the Israelis have decided that they're going to tell the Ukrainians to hold their beer, because now they have done the same thing, but this time with the 30mm chain gun of an Apache helicopter. So here's the clip, and we can see the drone right there. You can hear the Apache firing at it, and they got it.
Dang, man, this guy's going off too. That's crazy.
Dude, honestly though, man, that was wild, because when we heard the Mi-24 shooting, it has, I think, a 12.7mm dual main cannon on, well, at least inside the turret on the one we were watching. So you heard like a... It was almost like a little A-10 nearly, at least from what it sounded like. But this was that distinct sound of that chain gun that the Apache has, and it sounded like someone literally just popping off caps down in the southern end of Chicago. So let's listen to that again.
Man, thing's got some power behind it.
Man, this guy's just tweaking, man. Like, he is tweaking.
So happy about this, man.
Dude,
it's unbelievable.
Dude, he's like a railroader who saw like the teardrop cab. He's like, ah! Ah! It's like, dude, dang. But we did see the drone go down and explode just in the field in front of him. So this was a massive success. And I can see why the guy was absolutely stoked, because this is the second time that this has ever happened in history on film. So pretty impressive stuff, pretty cool to see. But nevertheless, we are seeing that the Israelis are continuing operations against the Hezbollah forces throughout the entirety of Lebanon. And another thing that is becoming very clear, at least from what we're seeing so far, is that many reports and claims that Hezbollah is only within the southern area of the country are markedly untrue at this point. We are getting information that is clearly giving us an idea that there is a decent amount of Hezbollah and IRGC activity within the northern area of Lebanon, even north of Tripoli, which is literally the most northerly areas of the nation. And nevertheless, we are seeing that the Israelis are finding proof and clear evidence that there is IRGC and Hezbollah operations within these areas of the country, which is giving us an idea that the Israelis will most likely be expanding their operations to include the entirety of Lebanon from north to south and east to west. We'll most likely be seeing that within the future, larger amounts of airstrikes will be conducted on Baalbek and Zahle specifically, considering that both of those cities are used as primary transport hubs by the IRGC to continue to funnel weapons and manpower, if need be in emergency situations, to the Hezbollah commanders and forces in the field that are still fighting against the Israelis within the southern area of the country. Meanwhile, the United States is still preparing an offensive arm to our armed forces in the region, as we have seen the arrival of B-52H Stratofortress bombers within the area today. We were able to hear that these strategic bombers did arrive in Central Command's area of responsibility today, and we were also able to see pictures of this. I believe we have one on our Twitter profile, and for some reason, this wasn't the one that was included, so let me make sure to look, and for some reason we don't have it here. That's interesting to see, as I just passed over that North Korean who was taking a nice long slumber. But nevertheless, let me see if I can find it for y'all really quickly, because it was a pretty good picture. And let's see here, B-52, and we should be able to see something. Here we go. But now we can see the picture, because the pictures went hard. This was actually a picture of one of the B-52s arriving into the Middle East today. From what we understand, they are from the 5th Bomb Wing, or the 5th Bomber Wing, from Minot Air Force Base. So to actually show y'all their origin point, we will put in Minot Air Base. And so that is
I
actually...
gotta say, like, that's a very, like, a much older strategic bomber, like, without a doubt. But that thing's still impressive to see it actually flying around. And I know people are like, look, this is not the most modern thing we've got, and it's definitely not, but it's still cool. Like, it's got a very menacing look to it.
Man, it does have a menacing look to it. I'm not going to lie, man. These things always look scary for some reason, even though I think at this point they're almost like 60 or 70 years old. These things still look menacing. And they did fly all the way today from Minot Air Force Base in the middle of northern North Dakota. You can actually see some of them down here on the tarmac. And they flew all the way from North Dakota across the Atlantic into the Mediterranean and then into Saudi Arabia today. And this was a picture of their final approach at one of the air bases inside of Saudi Arabia. These aircraft are only used in offensive means and really have no ability at all to operate in a defensive measure. It is showing us that the United States is starting to build up an offensive force within the area, at least as far as our air arm is concerned, and it may possibly be used within future weeks or maybe future months against the Islamic Republic of Iran in a last-ditch scenario, or maybe even a possible preemptive strike that is already being planned by the United States and Israel together. We are seeing that a large enough amount and a competent enough amount of air assets have been moved into the area so far just by the United States Air Force alone, and we are also hearing that they are being augmented by the arrival of multiple U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, which are also arriving somewhere in the area of the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea at this moment, possibly going to support the Air Force in its operations with its own missiles to be fired from the decks of those vessels. We will be waiting to see if that ever does happen. It does seem as though there is at least some sort of contingency planning happening within the Department of Defense at this moment, because while our public policy and stance is one largely a backing off, or what we have said is appeasement, we are seeing that the United States Armed Forces is preparing for a at least contingency plan where we could operate in an offensive manner. But still, a very interesting thing to see out of the Middle East, and we are still hearing from the Islamic Republic's government that they are planning on striking. They are continuing to pretty much keep the hype bus going, and I will read y'all exactly what we have from OSINT Defender today. U.S. officials believe that Iran will soon launch a retaliatory strike against Israel for their latest air campaign against Iranian military targets, but are still unsure of how or when the strike will occur, with some believing it may come on or near Election Day inside the United States. We're not exactly sure when it's going to be happening. A lot of people are believing in some camps that it will happen before Election Day. Some people are believing that it actually will happen on Election Day, making this the most explosive Election Day ever seen so far. Or that it may actually, well, actually, that's outside the one in 1864 in the middle of the U.S. Civil War. The country was literally at war with itself at that point, so maybe that one's a little bit more explosive. But nevertheless,
Can't forget that one.
you can't forget that one, and you also can't forget the one in 1944, which was in the middle of World War II. Both of those may be a little bit more explosive than the one that we're seeing right now, but nevertheless, it may end up happening on Election Day or just a little bit afterwards. Still, pretty much the entire time window or timetable that we're seeing shows that the strike is going to be happening anytime from literally tomorrow or just a few days after the election. So we're still looking at the strike, at least according to what everyone's saying right now, happening within this next week from the Iranians. However, I do want to make this very clear that these timetables issued by the U.S. government and U.S. officials have always been wildly accurate and usually are off by months. To be entirely honest, they continue to say that it's going to happen within the next few days for about 2 months until it actually happens, and then they go, "We told you so," although they were saying that for nearly 3 months. So going off of that, we're not entirely sure when it will happen. It may happen well after the election, maybe in some time of late November or even through the month of December or January, but at this moment, we are still waiting. And we are also starting to wonder, what will the United States do in response to this? Because the U.S. has warned Iran that Israel won't be able to be restrained if Iran launches another attack on the state of Israel. Pretty much what we're saying today is that if Iran launches an attack of any kind against Israel, they're not going to be around to hold the leash on the Israelis any longer, and the Israelis are going to have free reign to do literally anything that they deem necessary to the Iranians to be able to fix the situation. That may include targeting Iranian nuclear research facilities, that may also include decapitating the Iranian government from the top down. We're not entirely sure what the Israelis have up their sleeve. We already know the ultimatum that they issued in the past, so that's a pretty good area to work off of, but still, a lot of people are wondering, is this the time? Is the United States finally about to let Israel set itself loose on the Islamic Republic of Iran? And it does seem as though many people are having a great deal of faith that the United States trade winds within the area have changed significantly, and they're actually going to allow the Israelis to go ham on the Iranians. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking as well?
All right. So after the U.S. has now warned Iran that Israel won't be able to be restrained if Iran launches another attack, what are your thoughts? 57% said the U.S. will let Israel loose, while 21% said the U.S. is bluffing Iran on this one, and 11% said it's possible, but I personally doubt it. And on this one, I would have to say that overall, like the fact that the U.S. thinks that they're going to be the ones to tell Israel how they defend their country is once again still baffling to me, but overlooking that for just a second here, I'm going to say that it sounds like the U.S. is probably bluffing, because I still think the U.S. is going to adhere to that basically the de-escalation policies they've been adhering to for quite some time now, and I don't think they're going to back off the fact that they do not want Israel to hit the nuclear facilities inside of Iran. At least that's my current hunch, that the U.S. is actually not going to back off of that issue right there and let them hit them. Because if they were to do that, that might cause an unrestrained escalation, which the U.S. is very scared of. Even though Israel would be very justified in striking those facilities, the U.S. would not like the aftermath of that, because it might cause the U.S. to have to step up and actually fight a war, which they probably don't want to do. But I'm actually with kind of like the 22%. I think the U.S. is actually bluffing. So I'm in the minority here. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think I'm going to have to be within the 57% that does believe that the United States is finally going to let the Israelis set themselves loose on Iran. The United States, well, let me see how to put this well. Well, let's put it this way. The current president inside of the U.S. government is not going to be there in January, hell or high water. It's going to be someone else. So at this point, and also seeing that, to be entirely honest with y'all, he's being dragged through the mud by everyone at this point. I don't really think he cares. So if the Israelis start to obliterate the Iranians in the next month, I don't really think anyone who's currently in the government at this point is really going to care, because the guy who's in charge, who would make the call at this point, is not going to be there. Everyone's slamming the guy. And so regardless of who takes over, if it's a mess at all, it's going to be a mess they have to deal with, not him. That's at least what I'm seeing at this point, because I'm going to be honest with y'all. I've been listening and seeing and looking around, and it's literally been unavoidable. I've never seen this many people gang up on a president and just start beating the guy over the head with everything he's done in his life. So I think that he may just let them go loose on the Iranians and not care at all, because it's going to be a mess that someone else has to clean up. Regardless of who's picked, it's going to be someone else's problem, not his. So I think that's going to be my honest stance, and I think that's why we're starting to hear that they're just saying, look, if the Israelis start obliterating y'all, it is what it is. So with that, I hope that does.
Man, I'll be surprised. Like, honestly, though, I'll still be surprised if the U.S. just says, "Okay, Israel, if you need to go into Iran and knock out their nuclear facilities, like, go right ahead. We still don't want you to do that, but we'll allow it to happen and not give you any repercussions whatsoever for doing that." I would honestly be shocked at this point, because even though Iran is escalating the tit for tat, which makes it very, very volatile and forces Israel to respond with greater force, that's a little bit unproportional, because Israel has to start teaching Iran a lesson to make them stop attacking anymore in the future. I just don't see the U.S. actually backing off their policy of de-escalation. That would go against pretty much everything they've stood for at this point under the current policy. And while I see what you're saying here, that the current president may have an incentive to let them loose, I just don't think that they're going to do it, because the other powers that be, for example, the State Department, they just simply don't want this mess to get to that point. And honestly, they should let Israel do what they need to do. Like, that's very clear at this point. They should let them do what's needed to stop Iran from going any further. But I just don't think they are. But I'm curious here. It looks like about, and of course the poll question didn't ask this question exactly, but it looks like most people believes that the U.S. is actually not bluffing on this one. So very interesting to see, but I think personally we're not going to see the U.S. back off of it.
I would say that's a good point. And also, really quickly, everyone, we do have our bot in the chat. It's programmed to immediately remove messages that mention the names of anyone who is running in the current presidential election or the sitting president. So if you want to talk about them, first off, no domestic politics. I'm not here to bash anyone, and I'm not here to hold them up and make them sound like angels. I'm just talking about what we're kind of seeing at the moment. And considering that it does look like this, to me, it's starting to coincide a little bit to where we have to kind of bring it up. And I'm not saying that I like or dislike the current sitting president, or I like either of the other options, but I am going to talk a little bit about what I'm seeing, because that may be why there's a bit of a change in the statements being made right now. I've been wandering around, Matthew, on Twitter, really, like, for the past 2 days, specifically today a good deal. And of course, just to let y'all know, I do observe what's going on in the election, but I don't really like to talk about it, and I don't really like to get involved in it that much. And also domestic politics, getting on a side, long story short, not really my thing, but I still look at it enough to at least know what's going on. And usually the current president has been, he's had his image kind of put down a little bit, but it's also coddled a little bit, if we want to put it that way, where it's never been slammed a great deal. And when I went on to the internet today, I could not find anyone talking nicely about him anymore. It was literally everyone from everywhere has nothing but bad things to say about him. And I don't know if that's being compounded because Zelensky is kind of tearing into him specifically at the moment, and a couple of other people are as well. I don't know if that's what's starting to cause the shift. I'm not really sure, but still, this kind of a change in the statement from the U.S. government is coinciding at the same time that the current president, who has no chance in hell of being the president by next January because he's not even running for an election again, is being slammed. So here's what I'm actually thinking. I rarely would ever throw out an idea like this. He's sitting there, and we have heard that one of the most important things to him is legacy. And right now, literally everyone's tearing that down into the ground, so he has nothing to stand for at this point, or nothing to really safeguard or protect even in his own mind, considering that everyone from every side is literally ripping into the guy. So he's going, look, I don't care if that did turn into a war. I'm not even going to be around to fix this problem if it does become one. Whoever is picked, because both of them hate me at this point, it appears, because they're both saying that, they're going to have to fix it. So if the Israelis go ham and an entire regional war begins, that is going to be the problem with the next president, not me, because at this point,
Man, I think honestly, like, real quick, to weigh on your point you just made right there, I think honestly that even though, like, of course the president has the ability to say we're going to do this or that, and it's his final decision in theory, I think the powers that be, for example, the State Department, like I mentioned, and also all the foreign policy advisors, they do have quite a bit of influence. And even though the president does hypothetically have the last say in it, if all your advisors and all your people say unanimously, like, this is a bad idea, we can't afford this to happen, then I think the president might be in a bad situation where he kind of has to sort of give in to their demands, or otherwise he might have a bit of a problem on his hands with his advisors. So I think that even though he might want to just let Israel do what they want to do, because he really doesn't may or may not care about what happens after the fact, I think the advisors would step up and say, look, we can't have that because that would be a disaster in XYZ case. I can't get into politics, so we can't get into that, but it could be a disaster in the future for someone else.
Maybe so, but still at this point, I'm thinking that the Israelis may actually be let off the leash. If it's not for that reason, it's just for the fact that we held them back on the last attack that they conducted against Iran. They conducted it, and the Iranians didn't take that and just run with it and just ignore it, like they did kind of last time, where the Israelis did their token strike and then they just overlooked it. This time, the Iranians said, we are going to strike them, and it's going to be bigger than the last time. And so now we're going, okay, well, if we tell the Israelis to do that again, they're not going to even follow what we say. It may legitimately be a case of that we cannot restrain the Israelis at this point, because the Israelis probably had an agreement in closed doors with the U.S. government that we will limit this strike, but if this continues to escalate and the Iranians strike us back for this limited strike that we're conducting, we're going to go all in, because at that point it's clearly showing that this plan of action by the United States simply will not work. That could also be a hypothetical as well, to where the U.S. is quite literally saying we cannot control them at this point, because we promised them that if they conducted a limited strike that didn't hit the nuclear research facilities or the oil infrastructure, then the Iranians would digress, and they didn't. And so now the Israelis are going to go, clearly this is out of control. We have to do whatever measures necessary to deal with it, regardless whether you like it or not, because we're the ones at stake here. And that might also be the issue.
Maybe so. I mean, it could be. I just think ultimately, though, that, honestly, Enforcer, I had some lag there for a minute. I was trying to listen to you for a second. I'm not even going to try to pretend like I heard the whole thing. Like, honestly, the last part got cut out, so I didn't hear you. So I would like to weigh in, but sadly, I was not able to hear what you said.
It's fine. We can leave that at that. But moving on out of that area and on into the Korean Peninsula, we were able to hear some very interesting news from this area as well, as we are hearing that the South Korean government, the government of the Republic of Korea, is starting to weigh all possible scenarios for action against the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to the north. And this was a statement today from the South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yol, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I just want you to know I'm from Alabama and I don't pronounce everything right all the time. But nevertheless, they were asked yesterday whether Seoul could send weapons to Ukraine in response to North Korea aiding Russia, and the foreign minister stated that all possible scenarios are under consideration, which is a very open and broad statement, possibly showing that the South Koreans are even weighing in possible limited direct military action against North Korea in some way, shape, or form, either by sending an expeditionary force to Ukraine, or maybe even starting a small border skirmish in the area of the DMZ against the North Koreans to try and put heavier pressure on them to relent and pull out of the war in Ukraine. We're not entirely sure what that means, however, and we're still going with the most likely option for that statement is that they're probably considering the expansion of the Hyundai Rotem factories inside of Poland that are pumping out K2 Black Panthers and R600 Rhinos, and they're eventually going to start diverting that surplus production into Ukraine, where they can support and further field the Ukrainian armed forces against the North Koreans and the Russians as well. That's largely what we're thinking at the moment. But we will have to kind of wait and see what the South Koreans really mean by that statement. It's a fairly ambiguous one, and we really don't know what they mean by that, but we will be giving it a little bit of a wait and trying to get a little bit more of a clearer picture of what exactly that actually means. But moving on out of the Middle East and also North Korea and South Korea at the same time, it's time for us to move on into Eastern Europe. But before we do, I do have to say this really quickly. I do have to make a mention that we do not do politics on this channel. I'm seeing a very interesting thing come up, and I'll try and explain it because a lot of people do not know how the rules work on the channel. We have a no politics rule. No domestic politics can be mentioned in a demonizing or supporting light of any side. Period. That does not mean that I am barred from mentioning something that may involve the U.S. government or may involve figures that could be called political. Speaking about what's happening with the President of the United States today is a possible explanation as to why we're seeing a sudden change in policy inside the Middle East. That is not saying that the president is hated by me or that I like him or that I consider one party or the other to be angelic and the other one a group of heartless demons. I'm just trying to speak about the situation we're seeing in the region. That is not bringing up politics. Bringing up politics would be me saying one party is a group of angels and wonderful people and everyone ought to vote for them, and if you don't vote for them, you're a devil that just wants to kill people. That would be something along a political statement. And those are the statements that we've never made on this channel, and we never will. But beyond that, just because I was trying to explain a little bit about why there may be a bit of a foreign policy change in the Middle East at the moment, while trying to make sure that we do not support or condemn either political side, does not mean that the chat can completely devolve into an absolute cesspit of politics and everyone can start throwing in their opinions about who they like and dislike. If you like someone or you dislike someone, that's absolutely wonderful, and that's what November 5th is about. Y'all can go and vote for the people you like and not vote for the people you dislike. But speaking about it and yelling about it in this chat is not going to do anything to get your guy elected or your woman elected or who in the world they are. And so I don't really know why in the world everyone's wanting to come in now and act like the floodgates have been open, because we did not make a statement either supporting or condemning either side. I just stated it for what it is and what I'm seeing today, because anyone with eyes could see that that's what's going on. So with that, we are now going to be moving on into the area of Eastern Europe, where we have been able to see that within the city of Moscow, Putin has made a very interesting statement. And this is one that is very interesting to me, considering that we've seen this a lot in the war. So let me show you this. Sadly, the subtitles are not in English, but we do have the subtitles about the video. So I'm just going to play the video and then tell y'all what it said.
Лучший танк в мире. Вот сейчас можно сказать, что это Т-90 прорыв, лучший танк в мире. Он как только на позицию выходит, все. Там некому ничего делать. 90 прорыв, лучший танк в мире.
And that's the end of the clip right there. But really quickly, I think I'm going to have to come in here really quickly myself and start timing out people or banning them, because the chat is going absolutely crazy. Any political mentions at this point to get the situation under control is going to constitute an immediate ban, because I can't go through and moderate each individual to individual basis and time people out and explain to them why we don't do politics. So anyone who's mentioning politics, anything in a political vein whatsoever, it's just going to have to be an instant ban. Like, I'm sorry, that's going to have to be an emergency rule at the moment. But nevertheless, Putin did make a statement saying that the production of the T-90 tank is continuing in amazing form. And he did say that the T-90 Perov is the best tank in the world. 100%. Right now we can say that the T-90 is the best tank in the world. As soon as it gets into position, that's it. There's nothing for anyone to do from there. And that's a very weird...
It's not like we haven't heard that before, man. Every single tank they put out on the battlefield has been the world's greatest tank until Ukraine destroys like a dozen of them. It's like, come on now, this can't be a good one too.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know about that one, because let me go and get these really quickly. It's like the T-90M is the best tank in the world, right? Like, nothing compares and nothing beats it. But then you can go on to Wikipedia and, well, not Wikipedia, Google Images. You can literally just type in T-90M destroyed, and there's a literal endless litany of pictures of T-90Ms that have been destroyed. It's like, is it really that good? Like, you know, like, these are those hype comments that never pan out well in reality. You know, like to say the T-90M is the best in the world, and it gets into position and that's it. It's like, that's not the case, because we've been seeing more T-90Ms at this point in the war than any part, to be entirely honest. Like, we see either incredibly old tanks on the battlefield, or we see incredibly new ones. There's no in between at this point. And this thing gets smacked around like a child. Like, look at this. Like, for him to say it's the best in the world, it still has the same ammo carousel detonation issue that any model of Soviet main battle tank has had for decades at this point. If it gets hit, and if any of the ammunition catches on fire, it causes a critical detonation, igniting all ammunition within the vehicle, killing the crew instantly, and literally burning the tank to the point it's entirely unusable from that point forward. That does not spell the best tank in the world to me. That spells that it has absolutely no crew survivability, and not only that, it's incredibly easy to kill. The other thing that makes no sense about a statement like that is that the T-90M, like any other tank right now in the modern world, has no form of a trophy system or an electronic warfare system that can actually deal with incoming FPV drones. And FPV drones have proven to be the deadliest thing to this tank. We've seen it an endless amount of times. Not only that, we've seen that this tank does not perform much better than a normal T-72B3. And T-72B3s are far cheaper. A T-72B3 costs only about $3.5 million. These things run about $4.5 to $5 million US. And we don't really see a market improvement at all in combat performance, crew survivability, or reliability for that matter in any category. They are about as bad as your normal T-72. These things are just horrendous. And not only that, it's starting to quietly fade away the supposed great champion of the Russian tanker world, which was a T-14 Armata, which many of y'all would remember was not only supposed to replace the T-72 and the T-80 in service, it was also supposed to replace the T-90M. Because the T-90M was not supposed to be Russia's best and foremost main battle tank, it was supposed to be this. And this tank never made it really off of the prototype phase. This thing was introduced in the Victory Day parades in 2015. The Russians said that it was the best tank in the world, 100%. Once it gets into position, that's it. And then it ran into a million problems. Like, even at the Victory Day parade, the thing locked up at the parade grounds. The Russians explained it as the driver didn't know that he applied the parking brake, which seems a little weird considering the guy's trained to run the tank. We believe it was actually a critical engine failure, and the engine pretty much disintegrated in the back of the tank because it looked as though the tracks were completely locked in place as well, maybe showing that the transmission had seized and it was incapable of moving. That's what we were thinking at the moment. But not only
Man,
that,
it sounds like an absolute jalopy, man. Like a poorly designed Russian tank all the way around. And it's probably the same thing with the one that we're looking at right now that he's saying is the best tank in the world. It probably is like the same thing with that one. I wonder if it'll even ever make it to the battlefield.
well, the T-90Ms have been making it to the battlefield for about 2 years at this point, and they are a pretty prolific tank that is showing up in even larger numbers than we originally anticipated. At the beginning of the war, they only had about 50 of them, and so far I think we've heard about 200 of these things have been destroyed. So it is showing that they're producing them out of older T-72s, but still, they just don't do that well. There's only so much that one can do to improve the T-72, because underneath all of this fancy armor that y'all are seeing on this tank, it is still a T-72 for the large part. And I'll go and show y'all this really quickly. There are some caveats to be made to this statement. It's really simplifying the tank. But to show y'all the T-72A, if I can find one, this is actually what's under that T-90M for the most part. It's this. And it's just been heavily upgraded since its original inception. Now, a lot of people are going to be saying, now, wait a minute, Enforcer, that is markedly wrong and false, because yes, the hull is that of a T-72, but the turret is a completely different one. And that is kind of true. The turret is a marrying of the T-72 and really the T-80 together into one turret. It creates a completely different turret profile. It actually has flat frontal cheeks. If you ever remove all of the additional armor off of it, you will see them, but rarely ever do you see pictures of that. But nevertheless, it really is just an upgraded T-72. It's really like the peak upgrade of the T-72. We think that this is about as far as you can push the T-72 until you have to pretty much start designing a brand new tank from the ground up. And this is really as far as Russian armor evolution will really get at this point. But still, it doesn't mean that this thing is amazing. What they've done, to explain a couple of the improvements, is that there is I believe in a large power plant in the back that it allows for like an additional 1.5 miles off-road and on-road, which isn't really that much of an improvement. They did add a lot of additional armor to the frontal glacis. This is actually Contact 5 ERA armor. Many of y'all will know Contact 1. It's all over the place in the war. You see it on the Russian and the Ukrainian side, and they tack it on to literally everything. But Contact 5 is a huge evolution from Contact 1, at least in theory. But in actual practice, we've seen that Contact 5 has almost no armor values whatsoever greater than a Contact 1. Pretty much anything that we've seen so far that has defeated Contact 1 ERA armor, as well as the actual composite armor that's in the frontal glacis, has pretty much defeated the T-90M's Contact 5 and the composite armor in the frontal glacis. So it doesn't really look like there's a big improvement there. The turret does pretty much have the same armor protection values as that of a T-72. These frontal tiles here give it a very modernized look because the front of the turret has that kind of angled shape, almost like a Leopard 2A5. And let me see if I can show you that really quickly. The Leopard 2A5 right here. And let's see, this is a Leopard 2A5, so this will work. it has that bit of a frontal profile of the turret like a Leopard 2A5, at least a little bit, which does give it this modernized look compared to that, like obviously. But the thing about that though is that once again, it is Contact 5 ERA, and while that does work a little bit, it usually only works against some sort of a high explosive anti-tank round, not an APFSDS round, which is an armor-piercing fin stabilized discarding sabot. ERA really has no protective value against those kinds of rounds, and those are the ones that are usually used against another tank. And so for this reason, we have seen that the T9DM's turret has been woefully under-armored compared to the kind of competitors it's going up against in real life. That is compared, however, to the actual armor design of the frontal turret or the frontal armor cheeks of Leopard 2A5, because those little armor wedges on the front of the turret are actually detachable, and not only that, they're hollow. There is no actual armor within those little frontal slats. The real armor is actually in the main turret cheeks, and let me see if I can show you all that here on the Leopard 2A4 right here. They still have those main turret armor cheeks underneath that little wedge-shaped frontal armor piece. But what that frontal armor piece does, it doesn't explode when a shell hits it. It actually destabilizes an APFSDS round when it hits it. And that destabilization causes a minor amount of vibration inside of the APFSDS round in the remainder of its flight to the actual main turret armor. And that means, considering that an APFSDS shell is actually fairly fragile at that kind of a vibrational frequency, that when it hits the main armor, instead of even really going into the armor at all, it actually shatters on impact, pretty much completely removing the round's effectiveness and pretty much muting its abilities to actually cause any damage to the Leopard 2A4's turret armor. The T90M does not have that kind of an armor protection system. An APFSDS round will go clean through. There really is no vibration that's caused by passing through that first line of Contact 5. It hits the turret armor, and it has a possibility of maybe penetrating or maybe creating spall inside of the turret, which is about as bad as the round actually penetrating through. Still, it's not a good tank. Like, to go through all of that analysis just to get to the end, it's not a good tank. But now the Russians are trying to start up the propaganda machine and make people believe that the T90M is a super tank, although underneath it, it really is just a pile of garbage like any other Russian tank we've seen for the past 50 to 60 years. But moving on out of that and out of Moscow, it's time for us to move on down into Oryol, where we were able to hear some interesting explosions around the city. We don't know what they hit, but the Ukrainians did hit something around Oryol, and we were able to hear the sound of the drones and the explosions in the city.
Sounds like a juicy hit.
Man, juicy, bled.
Every lotta in town is going off, bled. All the jalopy lottas.
Man, bled. Like every single one.
Это уже какой? Штуки 20 нахуй.
Четвертый.
Our stuff's about to get blown up.
Man, did you hear that guy though, man? He said, drone. Listen to him, dude.
Man.
Wait, listen.
Это уже какой? Штуки 20 нахуй.
Четвертый. Летят.
What the hell is that, dude? Like, what is he doing?
Man, was he spitting on the ground or something?
Dude, he just sat there, he said, a drone. And then he said, I'm going to do a Monica Lewinsky. It's like, bro, nasty. But still, something did hit the city beyond that guy's absolute weird monologue. And we don't know what it was. We don't know what it's hit yet. But we are trying to wait and figure that out. And hopefully we'll see something beyond just that weird clip. But moving on out of that, and on into Ukraine itself, we have loads. I mean, we actually have loads and loads of frontline footage tonight. Sometimes we really don't. Sometimes the front lines are kind of generally inactive, except for key points like Pokrovsk and Vovchansk. But today we actually have a very large amount of video and picture evidence from pretty much every single area of the front. But before we move into all of that news and start covering it in great detail, I do want to make sure that we get to a very interesting question that has been asked about what's going on in the Middle East. If Iran does launch a major attack on Israel, should the United States participate in Israel's offensive retaliation towards Iran? And it seems that a lot of people are actually in support of that. And so Matthew, break it down for us. Not like, don't like break it down like, like a breakdancer, but break it down for us and tell us, what are people thinking about that? Are they in support of that kind of an idea or not so much?
All right, so once again, to reiterate the question, it says if Iran launches a major attack on Israel, should the USA participate in Israel's retaliation? Because, of course, Israel will respond. It's just a matter of how severe is the response going to be. So 47% said yes, the USA should help attack, while 23% said only if US bases are attacked, then the US should get involved. And 23% said no, let Israel handle business only and leave the US out of it. And I would say this, that considering the fact that Israel is one of our biggest allies around the world, and the fact that Iran has senselessly attacked Israel literally month in and month out with the help of the proxy forces, and now we've even moved B-52s into the region in addition to all of our other assets that the U.S. has moved into place, I would honestly say I'm with the 47%. I think the USA should help Israel attack Iran and put a stop to this madness that they're currently doing in the Middle East. Iran is by far the most destabilizing force in the Middle East, bar none, right now. Like, there's literally nobody else out there that is being as destructive as Iran's being in the Middle East right now, and the U.S. should get even for that and teach them a lesson so they don't keep doing it. So I don't think we should sit back and simply let Israel handle it. I think for once we should step up and actually take the reins here and take this situation over. So I'm definitely with the 48%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be within the 48% as well. I do believe that the United States should seize the opportunity, considering the diplomatic incidents like this do not happen often, to act offensively against the Islamic Republic of Iran and stop them dead in their tracks. It's something that is a major issue, and once again, lay out what's at stake here. Allow me to explain. Over the next 20 years, we are understanding that oil resources are in decline. Of course, usually that's kind of overhyped in media. People say it's literally going to run out like in the next 10 years, and then it doesn't. But we do have an understanding that much like any kind of a non-renewable fuel resource, it is going to get harder and harder to extract fuel because we have to drill deeper, or we have to find more creative and more expensive ways to extract oil products or any kind of products like that, that we will start to see a bit of an energy crisis coming around within the next 20 to 30 years. With that in mind, we have to be able to make sure that we are able to survive the next 20 or 30 years using the non-renewable fuel resources, so that way we can sort of largely transition over into some other form of fuel, whether that be nuclear or whatever. We're not here to talk about that, but at least we are talking about this strategic overview, and we have to be able to achieve that for the next 20 or 30 years. The thing about that is that the United States is capable of producing and making its own oil in large enough quantities that it can actually support itself and be self-sufficient. The issue, however, is that on a strategic level, we have to deny adversary nations, such as China specifically, from having complete access to enough fuel that they would need to also be able to conduct the same transition as seamlessly as they could if they have that kind of fuel. And the only place that China can really get fuel in those kinds of bulk numbers is from the Middle East, as my esophagus completely collapses. But nevertheless, the Middle East is where that oil comes from. And so the issue is that we have to deny the Chinese the access to that kind of oil. They could possibly get some of it from the Russians, but from what we understand, that still really wouldn't be enough, at least with how the current logistical chain is set up. So we are trying to deny them access to Middle Eastern oil, because that's really where they would end up getting it. So going off of that, we need to be able to keep this area within American control. It largely is within American control at the moment, save some parts of Syria and also Western Yemen. But generally, most of the countries in this area are either indifferent to the United States or are actually friendly to the United States, such as Israel, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, along with Kuwait, to name the major four. However, as time goes by, a country like Iran is attempting to try and either completely diminish American presence in the area or to completely make themselves the actual leader of this region, which means that the Chinese would have a much greater ability and access to bringing the Iranians under their control with the One Belt, One Road program, and pretty much bringing the Middle East under their control as well, securing themselves a very strong fuel resource for the next 20 or 30 years, meaning that they would be competitive with the United States during that time, leading all the way up until this possible energy crisis that will be coming up in about 3 decades. So, with that in mind, the Iranians right now are saying, like they said yesterday, they are able to produce a nuclear weapon and may field that at any time if they feel they're a threat. That means that we have a very small time window at this point to completely stop the Middle East from going in a Chinese direction, and keep it in an American one. But we have to be able to act fast to do that. Otherwise, we're going to be dealing with a very terrible situation for the next 30 years. And we may actually see that China rivals the United States during those entire 30 years, or maybe even surpasses the United States, because economically they're not taking that big of a hit because they were able to secure cheap transportation through fuel resources. With that in mind, the United States should act against the Islamic Republic of Iran. At a bare minimum, we should destroy the nuclear research facilities as well as their oil facilities, either oil refineries or depots, to be able to knock the Iranians out for 10 years at least. If we knock them out for 10 years, at a minimum even, we will be making sure to keep hold of the Middle East within the next important 30 years, and that's really the only amount of time that we have to be concerned about keeping an eye or keeping control over the Middle East. Beyond that, it literally could go to anyone at that point. The oil resources will most likely be dried up, or the oil deposits in the area will be so deep down, it will be financially infeasible to really be able to tap them. So with that in mind, the Middle East could go to China or Russia at that point, and it would not matter. But for the next 20 or 30 years, it does matter. And so going off of that, we need to be able to make sure that the Iranians cannot threaten American control and the American sphere of influence that does exist in this region, or really Western influence that exists in this region. Otherwise, we could see a very unfortunate or a tragic strategic incident pop up within the next 30 years where we lose the cutting edge or the advantage. That's really what we're looking at right now to try and explain what's going on in the Middle East as best as we can. And also, interestingly enough, y'all are wanting to actually know why the war in Ukraine is being fought. It's almost being fought for the exact same reasons. Russia also wants to be able to try and pry the Middle East out of American hands. Because if they're able to do that, considering they're mostly aligned with the Chinese, they're able to move the Middle East either into the Russian sphere or largely into the Chinese sphere, and once again secure most of the world's oil resources for the next 20 or 30 years, which means that their economies will be able to transition very smoothly into another form of an energy source, whether it be nuclear or whatever, in the next 30 years. And that's why they want the port of Sevastopol at the beginning of the war, because that's how they were able to operate a large enough navy through the Black Sea Fleet to steam it out of Sevastopol immediately into the Eastern Mediterranean and force the United States into pretty much an armed standoff and then diplomatic concessions whenever they saw that anything in the Middle East wasn't really going their way. So in a big picture sense, really all of the wars in Eastern Europe and the one that's happening in the Middle East right now are really being fought over who will be able to control the Middle East and whose sphere of influence that will be in for the next 30 years. So going off of that, and considering that the Iranians are pretty much the biggest threat at the moment to us losing our sphere of influence within the region, we have to be able to deal with Iran right now. And really it is the only point within that time window that we will be able to deal with them, unless if they get nuclear weapons, and then pretty much the entire situation is frozen as it is, and the Iranians can continue to pry the Middle East out of the Western sphere's hands and on into the Chinese hands. And so with that,
Well, isn't it very interesting, Enforcer, how foreign policy changes? I remember a time in American history where the mere mention of WMDs or weapons of mass destruction, meaning nuclear weapons or things like that, caused us to literally start wars on the rumor that they were there. And we didn't even know for a fact they were there, and we were starting wars over that. And now, like, this is how drastically things have changed. We won't even go into the Middle East if we have a strong evidence and strong clue that Iran does have the nuclear weapons, and they're very close to finalizing the production of those weapons. We won't even step foot there or even entertain the possibility of going to war there now. I wonder if it's because we're scared to repeat the same mistake of the past, or is it because foreign policy has gotten so soft that they're simply not able to go in there and commit to it because they're worried that it's going to maybe look bad on the president in charge?
That may be true. That may be the case. And also, I saw Smog say the U.S. is a net oil exporter. That is true. And I also did bring that up at the beginning of this analysis. The United States does have the ability, and I want to make sure to recap this again so that way everyone can hopefully be on the same page that I'm trying to put out here. And of course, this is my analysis. It's not gospel. It's not like the law, but this is largely how I'm seeing it. And if you read a good bit on how this has worked, or at least our policy has worked in the region, it's not about securing the oil for us, it's about denying it to other people. The United States is the largest oil producer in the world currently. It always has been, really, ever since the beginning of oil being an actual consumable good. The thing about that, though, is that while we are able to produce all of the oil that we need, and we're actually able to produce enough that we can export to other countries, The issue is that we cannot allow other countries to have the same access to oil that we have. Specifically, talking in our modern day and age, the Chinese. The Chinese do not have rich oil fields in their country, and a large amount of their economic activity that we've been seeing over the past 20 to 30 years is supported off of foreign imports of oil. Usually those come from countries in the Middle East or really from Iran. The thing is that makes it very cheap for them to run their economy. An economy is largely dependent on the cost of transportation, because transportation is always going to be an underlying cost to every single good, and how expensive it is because transportation is always included in that final cost. And that means that if we are able to deny the oil resources in the Middle East to the Chinese, even if we're not going to use them, if they're just diverted elsewhere to countries that really don't need the oil, or it's just stockpiled in the Middle East where it's not really used until we have to tap into it for some reason, the Chinese will have to end up expending more money to be able to transport goods in their economy, which means that everything is going to end up being more expensive. This means that the amount of money that they have is able to work less because there's not enough resources for their money to be spread out across, and this means that their economy will grow at a slower rate. It will still grow, but it will grow far slower, and that's the thing that we're trying to do. We're not trying to get the oil for ourselves because we need the oil. America's got plenty of oil. We've got enough oil for literally the sun to set over the earth for the final time. We'll probably still be using oil. But the thing is that
we can never have enough oil, man. We need more oil.
We need more oil. But the thing is that the Chinese cannot have the oil. That's pretty much what this all does boil down to, and that's why we're trying to deny them access to the area. The Chinese are trying. Like, if y'all look at the Chinese strategy, and you can see it very clearly. I'll put this out there very clearly in the, I believe it's the 19th People's Congress, the 5th plenum of the 19th People's Congress. Xi Jinping said that China was going to conduct at least a strategy, a national strategy of national rejuvenation by 2049. So by 2049, which once again is within that 20 to 30 year window I'm talking about, this very important here, the Chinese are planning on becoming a country that is just like the United States or beats the United States by that point in time. And to do that, they have laid it out very clearly that they need to control the entire Indian Ocean, including the Middle East, because the Middle East has the oil resources they need to cheaply grow their economy at a rapid pace like they have been for the past 20 years. And they want to keep doing that until they can eventually rival or beat the United States. That's why it is important that we deal with the Iranians, because the Iranians are the gateway for the Russians and the Chinese to be able to pry the Middle East out of the Western sphere of influence and into theirs, and to be able to ensure that they actually finally have the oil at the cheap prices they need and in the large enough numbers that they need to be able to keep their economy running very smoothly for the next 20 to 30 years. So I hope that does break down the kind of like strategic overview, at least in a very long-term picture, the best I can, at least with how I'm seeing it. And that's why I do believe we need to take advantage of this situation at the moment to be able to conduct offensive action against Iran, not to start a complete war with them. I'm sure the Iranians would not want to go to war with the United States, even if we did end up bombing them quite significantly, but to just at least destroy the nuclear research facilities and any measures or abilities that they have to be able to produce weapons of mass destruction. If we can completely remove that from Iran, we can keep the government there. We can pretty much not mess with them beyond that point, and they can continue to fund and fuel proxy forces wherever they want in the region. But if it ever got out of control, we would still have the ability to step in and stop them or completely overthrow their government, because they wouldn't have a nuclear weapon to hold over the world's head. So with that, I hope that answers all of that the best I can, at least from how I'm seeing it. And I just want to put this out there again. This could be an entirely wrong analysis. This is how I'm seeing it. I've read a good bit on what the Chinese think, what we think, what the Department of Defense's strategy is in this area, what the history of the area is, and what we've been doing in the area for really the past 70 years, and all of it looks to point in this kind of a direction to me. Someone could maybe come up with a different conclusion. There's many people who always have debates about what's really going on. You know, some people think that there's mole people living inside the earth that control the thing, but this is what I'm thinking at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And moving on from that, we do have a couple of interesting questions to answer. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat question of the night for during our first segment here, this one goes to JMP Traveler, who puts in a $100 donation, the largest super chat of the night,
Dang.
and huge shout out to you, JMP, for that very generous support. He said, as the name implies, I will be traveling. At some point, I will take the AVE, the Alta Velocidad Española high-speed train to Madrid, and anything neat about that train trip. That sounds fast, man. I wonder how fast that train goes.
I've seen these things, dude. I always thought they're ducks. I'll show you what they are. So here it is. The AVE right there.
That really does look like a duck. I guess it's like the most aerodynamic design possible, but it's very interesting looking.
Man, that thing is whack. It's honestly whack. It looks like they're starting to replace it, though. I don't know if they have a fleet of just ICE or ACE, as the Germans said last night, locomotives or multiple units that they're using at this point, because that literally is just like a Deutsche Bahn 406 just sitting right there. So they may be replacing the older ones with modern German multiple units, or I believe they're just called MUs or EMUs, electric multiple units. But still, I don't know a lot about Spanish high-speed rail. Interestingly enough, though, they have a fleet of, like, everything. Like, look at this. They have these, the ducks, as I call them. They also have what looks to be older TGVs from France, which I think are really cool. I really love the bi-level TGVs that they have nowadays. They look better. And then they also have what appears to be some sort of a variant of the Valero E, which is also called the DB406 in Germany. So pretty interesting. They actually just have like a hodgepodge fleet of really any European high-speed train they could find, which is pretty cool. But I don't know a lot about Spanish high-speed rail. I know a little bit about French high-speed rail and a little bit about German high-speed rail. I know a lot about British high-speed rail and especially American high-speed rail, but I don't really know a lot about the Spanish high-speed rail. One thing I do know, though, is that because of Francisco Franco, most of Spain's population moved to the cities. Like, Spain urbanized pretty much overnight, and really, I think it's like less than 30% of the Spanish population lives outside of the major cities like Madrid, Zaragoza, and so on. So in between Madrid and Zaragoza, there's literally nothing out there. If that is the area you're taking, let's see. You're taking it to Madrid. I don't know from where. I would assume it's probably from one of the larger cities, but there's literally nothing in between. And so Spain's modern rail network pretty much lives and dies on their high-speed rail network, because there are no local commuter trains really throughout most of the country that make stops at the smaller towns, because most of those towns are so small at this point, or so reduced in size, there really is no point for consistent rail service in a lot of areas of Spain. So the high-speed rail is really their only rail transport system, as compared to other countries that do have a decent amount of population density, like the UK, where you see that there are still a decent amount of commuter trains that operate along with a mix of higher speed and high speed trains, like the HS1 and the HS2, which run through southeastern Britain and also through the Midlands. But American high speed rail is incredibly cool, because it gets dogged on so much. But it really is interesting when you think about it, because American high-speed rail did not build new high-speed routes. Everyone in the world does. We didn't. I don't know. Well, I know why. They said it would be too expensive, and they didn't really want to put a lot of money into it, because at the time, Amtrak wasn't turning $1, and believe it or not, they're still not turning $1 today. But people love them, so the government put some money their way. And so what they did is that they built the entire high-speed network from Washington to Boston on old infrastructure. They improved the tracks, and they added concrete ties, and they also made sure that the rails were at least, I guess you could say, curved properly to where high-speed service was possible. But we also made sure that all of our trains actually have tilting technology, meaning that they actually lean into their turns, which means that they're able to travel in tighter curves at higher speeds, once again working off of the older infrastructure. And not only that, what's even crazier about American high speed is that while it doesn't get up to 150 or 155 plus along its entire length, it does exist over 450 miles of trackage, which is crazy. There is literally no high-speed rail line in the entirety of the UK that even gets close to doing 150 plus for around 450 miles. That would literally be the distance from London to Edinburgh for a high-speed rail route, and that just does not exist in the UK. So it's actually pretty shocking, because usually a lot of people dog on American high speed and say that it isn't really a lot, but when you look at the actual track mileage, it actually is a very significant amount. It's just that America's so freaking big, it's still localized just into the northeast eastern region. Hopefully, though, they do expand it. There is a plan out there right now by Amtrak to expand high-speed rail service, but once again, just to put this out there, in my opinion, it's being mired down by bureaucratic requirements. A lot of people want to make sure that their constituents are provided some sort of a high-speed rail service. So sometimes there just isn't the population density to actually support the current track plan. But I think that if there was a little bit more of a restructuring of that high-speed model, largely working off of a spoke and hub system, kind of like how airlines work off of, I think you can make it work, at least in some specific areas of the United States, and then have it supported in the interim areas where there is not a high speed by higher speed rail that is more affordable to run and probably would be a lot more beneficial to the sparsely populated areas that those railroads would be running through. But still, pretty neat stuff. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you so much for the massive support, JMP Traveler, in helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this channel on air. And so with that, a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than Tom S., who's a longtime channel legend as well. And thank you very much, Tom, for the $70 support. He said that thanks for the awesome no BS coverage of the world news, analysis, and the rabbit holes, and all those subscribers, and congratulations, and please take a live chat question, and long live the LSA.
And long live the LSA, and thank you so much for the kind words, Thomas. You've been around for a long, long time, and I got to thank you so much once again for enjoying the channel, and thank you for enjoying the no BS coverage. We try and make sure that it cuts out as much BS as possible. We do throw in jokes and stuff. I don't consider that BS, but I consider things like the nuclear bombers are flying, we're all going to die. That's largely like what the hell are you talking about kind of a thing to me. So hopefully we cut most of that out and we just kind of get down to the facts, or at least raw analysis that makes a good bit of sense. That isn't working on like the gnomes crawled out of the ground in the middle of the Atlantic and they're like secretly running the world or something like that. Hopefully it all sounds very sound and based in a good logical framework on the kind of news or even like the analysis that we lay out, because we don't really get to get into the deep analysis of like what's going on in the Middle East and why it's so important for the next 20 or 30 years for America to have control over the Middle East. We don't really get to get into that analysis much, and I like to do that every once in a while because it kind of puts things, at least in my mind, into frame on what is actually going on in the world and why we do the things we do. Because to a lot of people, sometimes wars look like they do not make sense. And a lot of people always, have like this idea that there's a kumbaya and can't everyone just get along. But what people don't know is that there is an endless game being played for people to have a luxurious enough life to be able to sit on their laurels and say, why can't everyone go kumbaya? There's a literal deadly struggle going on in the background all the time to make sure that people are having a great quality of life. Especially here in the Western world, we have the greatest quality of life the world over. That's not a contest. That's just fact. Go to China or Russia and see how the quality of life is there for your average citizen versus what it is here. And even at our toughest times, it's far better than the Chinese or the Russians would ever conceive. And that's because we are constantly always working as national governments combined in a united front to keep that the way it is. And it takes a lot of effort. Sometimes it actually takes wars being fought over that sort of a thing. And that's why we have to make sure to keep these kinds of strategic or Western and American imperatives in place. Otherwise, you could see that the Chinese start to get a quality of life like that. And I can promise you, if the Chinese start to get an American quality of life, that will be at the Americans' expense. There is only a limited amount of resources and economic ability in this world, and it's always going to be disproportionately placed towards one country or the other. And if the Chinese start to eke an advantage out of the way of the United States, you are going to see that the American quality of life will start to markedly decline, and we will start to live lives very similar to that of the Russians. So I just want to put that out there very clearly. This is an actual struggle, and it seems as though people are always detached from it, because in America, it always looks like no matter what's going on in the world, it's always the good times, and they're always rolling in America. But I promise you, if you let the good times make you soft, and you don't pay attention to what's going on out there, they'll get you. Because those people want to live the lives you're living. Like the Chinese and the Russians, they fiend for the day that they will be able to live the life an American lives. That's why they love American stuff. And the day that they get that, you're going to see that America's in the Western world as a whole, not just the United States, but Europe, will be in bad, dire straits. It's not going to be a good world to be in at that point. And that's why it's very important to support American and Western interests around the globe and to kind of make it clear what all of this really is about. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. Thank you for enjoying the rabbit holes, by the way, Tom S. And thank you for enjoying, thank you for congratulating us on all the subscribers, because it has been crazy lately. We're actually just at the cusp of 303,000 subscribers at this point, and I never thought that this channel would reach this kind of a height. Ever. Like, I never thought it would. And so I'm absolutely blown away by that, to be entirely honest. And I got to thank you so much once again for enjoying the channel. And I also got to thank everyone as well for enjoying the channel and subscribing to it, because I never thought we would even make it this far. And I welcome every single person here who is subscribing and who really is just watching daily. And of course, welcome to the LSA, and I hope that y'all are at home here. But still, one more thing. I just saw someone say something, Matthew. I saw someone say something, and I was like, oh, what are they talking about? Someone said, where is it? Balbazi said, I kind of disagree with the idea that someone has to suffer for others to prosper. It does sound a little bit crass, I will agree, but it's a true statement. And if you ever look through history, you will see it is the case. If you can literally look at just towns in the West, like I've been just hooked on watching documentaries about ghost towns lately and their rise and decline, and their rise and decline always came, well, really their declines always came at the expense of them and the benefit of someone else. That's always how it works. You see, that's kind of the unfortunate thing. And, you know, it doesn't sound great, but I'm not one to, you know, sugarcoat things and say everyone can have a great life, because not everyone can. There's a very limited number of resources in the world that are available, and there's a very limited amount of ability to extract more resources for people to live a good life. Let's say everyone lives a life like the United States. From what we assume right now, with current global economic output, or really industrial output, to put it that way, it would take 7 Earths over of manufacturing and industrial ability to support all 8 or 9 billion people who are in the world right now, and having every single one of them live the kind of life that people in the United States live. It would take 7 times the output of the entire world right now to be able to achieve that. That is something that lets us know, if you want to live the life that people live in America, it has to be at the expense of someone else. It's going to be at the expense of another country that is being put down for that. Because it's either the Chinese are putting us down, or we're putting the Chinese down. And whoever's getting put down is going to be the one having the worst of the lot. And the other one who's putting the other one down is going to be having a pretty good time and riding high on the hog. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, because it is something that you can entirely see throughout all of history. It's always true. For a country to succeed, another country has to be put to the wayside. It's always how it goes. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. It's a good point, though. It would be nice if everyone could live a great life, an American quality of life, or really a Western quality of life, but that's just not the case. It just cannot work like that. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we also have to bring up something else. As I was saying, the quality of life that some countries have is at the benefit of some and at the expense of others. And for one to benefit, one must be at a disadvantage. And one country that clearly is going to be at a disadvantage is the Russian Federation, as we do know that they are in a pretty tough spot at the moment, a bit of a bind, to be entirely honest with you. And it looks as though they are going to be becoming a little bit smaller. And if you are happy about that, and if you are rejoicing about supporting American and Western interests, please make sure to go to officialenforcerstore.com and get that.
It's the merch plug. Look at that.
Man, we got to have that merch plug, because tonight is the last night. Like, we have to make sure to let y'all know this, because the Make Russia Small Again shirts that are on the official Enforcer store are only going to be running for tonight. This is the end of the merch run. We have deliberated over this a good bit and talked about extending this into the next week, but we kind of feel like we would be beating a dead horse if this went on for 2 weeks, so we only wanted to make it 1 week. So this is the final night that the Make Russia Small Again shirts are going to be on the merch store. You can find them in the link in the description below. You can actually go straight to the merch store. They come in a wide variety of colors. They also come in a wide variety of sizes, from small to 5XL. They're $25 a pop. They are incredible shirts. They are Gildan shirts made of 100% American cotton, and 10% of the profits that are made from these sales will be donated to United 24 to help them out in their efforts inside of Ukraine. So please do make sure to get one while you can. They are incredible incredibly nice, and I've got to say I'm honestly a big fan of them. We are actually going to be starting an entire shirt series. We don't know if it's going to be like back to back to back, but over time we will be making different versions of the shirt for different countries around the world, like make China West Taiwan again, or make Iran Persia again, or something along those lines for multiple different countries. We will be making those, but we are really starting to eyeball that our next merch release probably will be the LSA flags when they're coming back around. So we'll actually have some out before LSA Day, or really LSA week, comes around at the beginning of next year again. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Please make sure to get some while y'all can. It does support the channel, and not only that, it also supports Ukraine as well, as 10% of the profits are donated to U924. And so with that, I hope that does address that quite well indeed. And also, I hope that y'all do enjoy these shirts absolutely massively. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
All right, so our last one of the segment here goes to none other than Mayor of Spin City, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Mayor of Spin City, for that very generous support. I said, Fain, yeah, LSA and LFG.
And long live the LSA, and I thank you so much for the massive support, Mayor of Spin City, and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to be here right now making this thing a reality. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are now going to be moving on into the rest of the news that we have today. Well, I was not able to put down any markers inside the Kursk Oblast, but we were able to see our first North Korean killed today in actual picture evidence, and he was carrying some sort of North Korean military papers on him when he was killed. So we are able to confirm that that is a North Korean soldier. Also, really quickly, let me see if I can go and find North Korean military papers. And let me go see if I can show these to y'all. And let's see here. We want to find the military passport. And it is very hard to find these kinds of documents because they make them almost impossible to find. And so I'm not able to find these quickly. But I did see that someone went through a very in-depth analysis today of the document that was on the person. It's not a passport, like a passport allowing them to travel out of the country. It is some form of a military ID. And so let me see if I can pull up North Korean papers. Let's see, we want to put North Korean passport. Maybe that'll pull it up, and I can find y'all the one that he had. It was a very simple one. It looked as though to be made almost on some form of cardstock. It wasn't really that in-depth, and I cannot find one at the moment. There are loads of pictures of just normal North Korean passports, but I did see a lot of people saying that it was some sort of a military ID, not a passport. But it does have, like, the shape and form of a passport. So we are able to confirm the North Koreans are the point of contact at this point. They are getting killed. One of them was captured. And so we are getting an idea the North Koreans are actually there. But moving on out of that and into our location unknowns, we were able to see some very interesting clips today. Starting off with 17 Russian soldiers refusing to go to the front because they actually have hepatitis C. A very interesting reason to not go to the front. But nevertheless, here is the clip.
Уважаемые зрители, уважаемые, кто будет просматривать это видео, мы хотим обратиться к вам с помощью о том, что к нам, к военнослужащим, контрактникам, а также мобилизованным, мы служили в российской армии в 14-28, а также 95-й полк. Вчера были направлены с передовой, с Харьковского направления, были направлены в город Мулино, в НП Мулино, Нижний Новгород, воинскую часть, под предлогом прохождения военной комиссии. Когда мы приехали сюда, мы узнали, что нас привезли сюда не для ВВК, а для расформирования нового полка, да. Вот. Нас как бы из 22 человек 17 социально значимых болезней, вирусный гепатит С. Приказ Владимира Владимировича Путина, что с гепатитом С не может служить, не может находиться на передовой. То есть это приравнивается, можно приравнить то, что наши командиры которые сидят там, отправляют...
Bro, this guy's making it sound like they're freaking biological weapons. He's like, can you believe it? They sent us to contaminate the entire Russian army. It's like, dude, you're the one who got it. It's like, why do you even have that?
Also, like, I really don't doubt for 1 minute that Putin probably knows that these guys probably have this, and he's probably sending them there anyway, thinking, who cares? Like, Putin thinks in his mind, let's use the guys as fodder, like cannon fodder, and who cares what they've got? That's probably like the sick mindset that Putin has at this point. He doesn't care about like what the rules say. He just wants more meat to put out there for the slaughter.
Probably, maybe.
Нас с вирусным гепатитом, отправляют нас туда заражать российскую армию, дабы чтобы что, победила Украина и полегло много наших бойцов от вируса, потом заражение родственников. Это уголовная ответственность.
You know what? While this guy keeps talking about this, I'm going to pull up. How do you get it? Like, how do you get...
Полковник нас не принял и сказал, что нас отправили назад на передовую. Нас 17 человек, мы никуда не поехали. Мы пришли жаловаться с обращением в военную прокуратуру. Военная прокуратура нас отправила в Смоленск, в нашу часть, чтобы мы там решали этот вопрос. Сказали нам не писать жалобы.
So I found something very interesting here for y'all to know, because I do know, like, largely how you would get hepatitis C, but to just give y'all a little bit more of a specific example of how you would get it according to the World Health Organization: exposure to blood from unsafe injection practices, unsafe healthcare, unscreened blood transfusions, injections for a certain kind of, a thing that makes you feel good temporarily but isn't good long term, and a certain kind of practices that involve intimate relations with others that would lead to the exposure of blood. So whatever they've done, it's not good for them to have this, like, regardless of what it is. And Matthew, I gotta be honest with you, I think the Akhmat's behind this.
What makes you think that?
I don't know, man. I mean, it's the way it's transmitted, man. It sounds a lot like it would be an Akhmat thing. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Yeah, I think I got you now. And also, by the way, like, why are these guys so scared to be sent to the front lines, by the way? Because it's like, these guys are just going to be out there fighting. It's like you're not going to be, having any opportunities to spread this, if that's the concern. I'm not sure, really. From what you said, it sounds like it has to be spread through blood and has to be, like, put into the bloodstream, which is a pretty, like, invasive way to get it. So I'm not sure really what they're so worried about other people getting it for, because I'm not really understanding.
Yeah, I don't really get it either, but they're making it very clear. They're like bioweapons out here.
Oh, a written collective complaint. In other words, lock us all up, please.
Yeah, we want our names down in the registry so that way we can all be shot, and then the blood can really spread.
He's taking his own criminal complaint to the criminal prosecutor's office so he can get locked up today.
Dude, this would be the best TikTok ever, dude. Just sit there and go, I'm going to go into the military prosecutor's office and I'm going to be put in front of a firing squad this afternoon. It's like, that's what this intro ought to be, man.
The prosecutor just says, are you sure you want to file charges on yourself? He says, what, блядь?
And he just handed it over.
Oh, don't forget your email. We need to know where you're to find you, fella. I ain't scared to give out that email. Don't worry, though. They'll find you.
They're trying to line up that email. Reasons unexplained, but I'm sure the firing squad will really appreciate knowing the email address so that way you can just tell them to show up to the firing line. But moving on from that, we were able to also see some Ukrainian F-16s in action over the skies today. Take a look at this. They look clean.
Oh, no, that's juicy, man. That's juicy.
Juicy, man. Extra juicy. Also, we got to see today as well, not only were F-16s flying, but Buhankas were also flying as well. The little loaf, unfortunately, ran over an anti-tank mine and was heavy enough somehow to actually detonate the mine. So, y'all are about to see a Buhanka fly. So, here's the clip. There it goes. Yili dili unkabaki, uli dili unkabaki. Oh my god! Oh my lord! The roof is gone, to put it lightly. As y'all can see right here, there went the roof. That's the roof right there. And that just went straight into space. The walls of the vehicle went flying outwards, and I don't think anyone in that vehicle is cold. I think they're all very warm at this point. But still, great to know that Buhankas can fly. We also got to see a Ukrainian MiG-29 hitting the Russians with hammers. And we can see the MiG-29 right here, flying through the skies. In a second, it's about to start releasing those hammers. And we can see it flying upwards at a very fast angle, dropping the hammers. Also, that's, I believe, I forgot what that is. It's something like a kinetic release or something like that. It allows for the bombs to have a little bit more range, just due to physics, you know, and how gravity works and everything. And we see the MiG-29 now hitting the deck, and we can actually see the hammers then later on hitting the Russian positions. Overall, not bad, not bad. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but not bad at all. Moving on from that, we also got to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours.
Man, we have pure juice. We have 4 Bobcats today. That is lovely to see on a nice November the 2nd, the second day of November, that is, 4 Bobcats. I love to see it, but Enforcer, tell us more.
And it was a pretty good day. According to Ms. Disa, the AFU adjusted the total drone loss by an additional 1, meaning that 29 drones were lost today, and the rest of the losses were reported as normal. Nothing record-breaking, but still the losses were pretty considerable. 1,270 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 17 APCs, 76 supply trucks, 8 main battle tanks, 37 artillery pieces, 28 drones, and 4 Bobcat skid steers. Overall, it was a very good day today, and we were very happy to see that these losses were decent, and once again showing that the Ukrainians are conducting pretty successful defensive operations in most areas, and specifically today in the Kharkiv area. I'm so sorry, y'all. I have to explain this really quickly. We told y'all last night that we were going to be trying to end the stream a little bit early because we had to get up very early in the morning. I only got about 4 hours of sleep today, so if you hear me stuttering or stammering, that's probably why. I tried to mask it with some coffee, but it's still coming through, and it's been bothering me tonight. So if y'all are hearing like a little moment here and there where I'm like, I have a stammer, it's because I have like 4 hours of sleep I'm working off of. But moving on from that, we were able to see the 101st Guards Brigade slamming some Russian forces in this area. Now we can see the soldiers moving through the trees, but the Ukrainians have already spotted them. Oh! Dude, they are accurate these days, man. I think they, like, get it within feet now. It's not, like, in the general area. It's literally right on them.
Lethally accurate, Liat. Just a little small explosion in the forest. If the Russian falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, did it really fall?
Man, these Russians are running, man. Dude, they sat there and heard me just say, man, they're like, the Ukrainians are landing these within feet of them. And they were like, feet? Oh no, do you hear that? I have a Nickelodeon contract. It's Harvey Weinstein. Run! You know, that's what they're like at this point. And we can see them trying to get a guy out of there. And we can see the Ukrainians are still making sure to drop those bomblets on them. And we see one Russian just hanging out down there. He's kind of chilling. But you see another one, he's kind of grilling. And this guy is also taking a nap as well as this one. Many guys are taking long naps, long-lasting naps. We also got to see that a Russian drone ran into a complete stroke of luck today. It almost ended up getting hit by a Lyuti long-range drone. That was not the intended target of this Russian FPV drone, but it almost ran into it nevertheless. You could actually see one right there and another one right there. Pretty wild to see because these things were actually
right in the camera frame too. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. And these things were actually flying deeper into Russia. We actually believe these may have been the drones flying to Oryol that we heard of the explosions of just a little bit earlier on in the news. Moving on from that, though, and into the Vovchansk area, we were able to see a decent amount of action by the 3rd Brigade as they were slamming Russian forces heavily with the drones today. And so here's one of our first clips. And we're going to be muting that, but Well, you can see here that they're once again dropping a little thermite drone over the tree line here. And slamming some more into other positions. Oh, and a Russian right there. Oh, he was laying down in the field. It looks like he'll be laying down for a nice, good time. And we see another
No
one.
lying down on the job. The Ukrainians went in and was HR.
Man, I can really tell that you haven't slept at all because I don't even know what that was supposed to be, man. You're like, man, really hit him.
No
like
sleeping on the job. HR comes in and gets you. You know what I mean?
Man, I'm telling you, man, I could actually use some sleep on the job right now, man. Whew, I'm exhausted. Like, I'm not going to lie. And we can see them just continuing to slam these Russian forces. And, oh, a little fire started right there. A little crispy fire, a long-lasting fire. And moving on from that and into our next clip a little bit further on down, we also got to see that they were hitting even more Russians in this area as well. And here's another clip from the 3rd Brigade. This guy was on a bike. He's no longer on a bike. We can see another one getting hit by the 3rd Brigade. And we can see a FPV drone going into that dugout and creating a nice mushroom cloud. We love mushroom clouds. We can see another FPV drone slamming into a Russian Ural. And we can see another one hitting a Russian urinal. We can also see this one sneaking up on some sort of a missile vehicle. I was not able to tell what that was. It was a missile carrier of a sort. We can also see another position getting hit. Looks like it may have had a small amount of ammunition at it, as it blew up quite brilliantly, spreading fire throughout the entire tree line. And that's the end of the clip, but still really impressive to see and cool to know. Moving on from that and into the Vovchansk area, we were also able to see more Russians under fire, and they were really under fire. Check this out. Actually, this is the Freedom of Russia Legion, and they were getting slammed. Check this out. Okay, that one wasn't that bad. The next one is pretty bad. Like, it was almost right on them. They're pretty calm. Oh!
That was like right on top of them, basically.
Yeah, luckily all the guys in the Freedom of Russia Legion made it out of that A-OK. None of them got wounded or injured, at least in the clip from what we know. But those were some incredibly close calls right there. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see some drone footage showing the city of Vovchansk as it stands or doesn't stand today. And we can see here the drone flying over the ruins. Once again, we can see that pretty much every single area of the city has been reduced to rubble. Very few of the buildings stand, and if they do, it's generally the central core of the building that is all that's left. From what we understand, Vovchansk may actually be the most devastated city of the war, even more than Bakhmut, Mariupol, or Avdiivka for that matter, which have all been major battlegrounds that have suffered very significant damage. We have just never seen this level of destruction in any city, and it is showing that there's been a heavy amount of artillery usage by the Ukrainians and the Russians to be able to just fight over this very small area and to just try and claim control over the city alone.
It's really a shame to see these cities like in ruins like this. Like, obviously this is part of war, so it's expected, but like to really see like the whole city in ruins and to know that was someone's like whole life like here in this city, and it's just all shattered and torn down. It's just really sad to see.
It is very unfortunate. And the air is filled with a mix of fog and smoke just from the city itself, which is very crazy to see. But moving on from that, and a little bit outside the city, we did get to see the 3rd Assault Brigade conducting some actions in the area and actually capturing a couple of Russian soldiers as well, which, here's the clip.
Выкуриваем их.
And we can actually see the Russians. I'm going to have to mute it because of the copyrighted music, but we can actually see the Russians here that they captured later on being interrogated. And unfortunately, we don't have subtitles for what they're saying, but we can see the clips from the 3rd Brigade showing them capturing these Russian soldiers. And now they've been joined by another 2. We can see that they blurred out the Russians that have been captured, at least at this point. And we see them once again showing the Russians. We can actually see the red tape on their uniforms through the blur, showing us that they are Russians. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but still a very interesting one to see, and great to see the 3rd Brigade doing its work out there. Meanwhile, moving a little bit further down the lines, we were also able to see more Russians getting hit just south of the area of Kupiansk by the 92nd. And we're going to be muting that. That is certainly copyrighted, but we could see the drone coming in and already slamming its first vehicle of the video. Boom! Oh my lord! That was a lot more explosive than I thought it was going to be, but we can now see them hitting another one. And that one didn't have a violent explosion, but it was destroyed. But you now see the 3rd vehicle, a T-72, being targeted and destroyed as well. We can now see...
Nomad said, drones are bad for your health. I would say so. These Russians are finding out this is deadlier than hepatitis C.
Man, and how they get the hepatitis C? Nobody would know. Oh my lord, holy moly. But we can see here the final kill count. Also, one thing though, that ain't no T-72. That's a damn T-80. Like, what are they calling it a T-72 for? They put a BM, well, the BMP-2s are correct. The Patriot UAZ, that is correct as well. That was a Russian, or as they call it, a orc, or an occupier. And then they also did get one Kamaz. But that is not a T-72 right there. That's a T-80. Big difference. But still, nice clip, and great to see they were able to knock this equipment out. Moving on from that and down towards Svatove, we also get to see a Russian OSA being destroyed as well. Now we're going to be muting that, but we can see them dropping a bomblet right on it. Immediately knocks out the surface-to-air radar and fires off a SAM.
Oh, it's OSA destroyed.
Sam, say, can you see? But he's moving on from that. We also get to see the Ukrainians capturing another Russian soldier. There he is, right there. He's just smoking a cig.
He looks rather old. Hey, also, he gave that guy the side eye when he wasn't looking. I saw that.
Man, you know how it is. Slaw.
Slaw.
And with that, we're now moving on from that clip and down towards Chasiv Yar, where we actually got to see the Ukrainians in the 5th Assault Brigade conducting a limited counterattack today against the Russians in the area of Chasiv Yar. When you see them firing wildly into the trees and then moving into the trees, because these trees do not speak Vietnamese, they speak Ukrainian.
Someone said that guy was 25. No way. He was not 25, Frank. I'm sorry. I got to disagree with you strongly. That fella looked like he might have been in his 70s, like just from what I saw for a second. That guy was definitely not a young man.
Matthew, you're wrong. He was 25. He works the night shift.
Oh, come on, man. Listen, come on, Jack. I mean, he's got the, he's all, anyway.
For some reason, man, your microphone, I don't know if you're getting closer to it or something, but it's sounding more deep-fried at this point, and so you just said in the most deep-fried way, oh, come on, man. I was like, what the hell? I was like, dude.
I actually picked up the mic, to be honest with you, because I've gotten so tired I need to lay back in the chair a little bit. I'm picking the mic up to talking to it, so I'll move it back a little bit so I'm not deep-frying.
Man, deep-fry it, man. Damn. Anyways, moving on from that.
Is it better now?
It is better now. And also, speaking of better now, you want to see something that really is better now? These Russians were having this fun time in a supply truck today, Matthew. They were going, look at the ride in the truck. And look at this. They're having so much fun. I'm sure nothing bad will happen. I spoke too soon.
Oh my god, man. Like, what the hell? What, did a drone hit it?
Yeah, it got hit by an FPV drone and burned down.
How to go from joyful to charred in less than 5 seconds.
You hear the radiator and oh man, terrible stuff. But still, that was a funny cut that they did right there. Moving on from that though, and down into the area of Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians were able to hold the Russians largely where they were, and were also able to capture a T-72B3.
Как заказывали. Новенький, свеженький, сексуальненький. Чуть-чуть подгорели с ним, но сделали.
Slow. But still, great to see. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we were also able to see them hitting even more Russian forces. Oh no, we're not having that music today. I'm not getting copyrighted. That US anthem we got is already copyright enough. But we can see here, the FPV drone coming on down, hitting that Russian. Oh, he hopped out. And, but you see him hitting another one. That's, oh!
I heard you over there. You said that FPV drone. And I was like, what was that? I was trying to figure out what that was. I think, what was that, a hiccup?
It was. I was like trying to disguise
I was trying to figure out if that was lag or not.
No, that was 100% me. Like, I want them to be here for me. But also, another interesting thing we got to see was a video from United 24 about them digging in Pokrovsk, really digging defensive positions. But still, it was very interesting. So, without further ado, here is the clip.
FPV drones are dangerous. Don't run, watch and listen for it. Do you want to do some shooting?
We're heading to a new position held by the 33rd Brigade. The guys load construction material for the new trenches. We'll be roughly 5 kilometers from the Russians, but the situation changes every hour. The infantry vehicle smells like sweat, gasoline, and war.
Godspeed, guys. Godspeed.
We drive fast.
Yeah, have to admit that's my first time in that country. It's quite an experience. But it's going to really withstand and like mind and FPVs. Well, let's hope we're going to the test tonight.
The drive is long. Everybody's on the edge. We hide under the trees and wait for instructions.
Так, давайте, идемте за мной.
Follow me.
In the bunker, the usual massive screen shows a live stream of surrounding positions filmed by drones, while soldiers are resting. Nomad, the platoon commander, evokes recent fights.
We had them in a column, but all of that got burned because actually, when they rushed in, they got taken. They ended up killing their own. And after that, the next day, they scattered everywhere. And that was it.
A 33rd Brigade drone recorded everything a few days ago. Outside, the tree line is intact, which means the Russians haven't managed to hit it so far.
We're gonna head out in Yeltsin by sea to go to our first position. So, we're gonna be fairly visible from the sky.
Why in the world does this sound, Matthew, this part of the audio? Why does it sound like those astronauts on that old, like, lunar base game where you had, like, the voice thing that you could put stuff into and they were like, John Madden, or something like that? Why in the world does this part of the audio sound like that?
I don't know. It's like kind of deep fried, but kind of like weird. I can't describe it.
Hold up, I gotta go pull up that, man. People gotta know what I'm talking about. They're not. Most people will not know. Let's see, astronaut John Madden. Like, that's all I need to pull up. It will find it. Yeah, it was the Moonbase Alpha game. Okay, here it is. Here we go. It's about to happen here in a second.
Da 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 da
It sounds like that almost, man. It's like, what the hell? Like, it's weird.
I mean, it's pretty close, man. He might be a Moon Man Alpha or whatever it's called.
Right, he's out there. He's going, John Madden. John Madden. Let me see if I can find that part, man. It's John Madden. John Madden. It's like the same audio quality. It's like, what the hell?
I've never heard this in my life, man. Like, this is the first time I've ever heard this. This thing is Moon Man Alpha.
Dude, we had Moonbase Alpha on one of our really old computers. This is a really old game. Like we were kids when it came out, but I remember that you got it and I got on it and I remember hearing someone actually do the John Madden thing and I was like, what the hell? And then like I think it was like a year and a half ago or something, I ran into it again on YouTube and it was like Moonbase Alpha John Madden, and for some reason it clicked in my head that I remembered hearing that before, and I clicked on it and I was like, I remember this. It's from childhood. But anyways, moving on from that, this guy has the same audio quality. That's the whole reason I pulled that up.
Thanks to my black helmet.
Our team will follow the platoon commander in his inspection in broad daylight. But before touring the tree line, a few recommendations.
FPV drones are dangerous. When you spot one, don't run, watch and listen for it. Stay near tree trunks, so it might get caught in the tree if it comes close. Listen for incoming shells. If it whistles, it's not heading your way. If the whistle is fast, drop to the ground immediately. Whether it flies over or lands nearby, get down. Cover your head. Got it?
Each of us has to keep at least 10 meters between us, so only one will be wounded, or worse. On the way, a few soldiers carry planks and plaster on their shoulders for the trenches. It's a painfully slow process when the Russians keep attacking. The first position is not ready, and Nomad not happy. But he keeps his cool.
Come on, let's set up the position so we can at least start shooting. Do you want to do some shooting?
Another silent walk to hear death if it's coming from above. The fields marked by a ribbon around us are mined.
We arrived at another position. As you can see, the walk / run was pretty intense, pretty exposed.
John Madden.
Yeah, that's the kind of fairly paranoid feeling that of hearing FPV all the time, plus the artillery, of course. And I mean, it's good paranoia. It can, save your life somehow.
On this line, soldiers only rely on heavy machine guns, such as Mark 19 and mortars supported by a drone unit. It's the fourth line, but these days, it tends to become the first or zero line very quickly. The Russians tried to storm one of their positions a few days before.
There's a lot of shellings. We plan to move away gradually because they are stronger and have more personnel. From where do they attack? From everywhere.
So we're in the trench. On the behind us, there's the mortars. This Ukrainian-made mortars, Soviet model, American mines. Basically, it's in the direction of the Russians, which are around there. Apparently, they're also coming from all positions these days. So as you can see, it's a very low trench, but it would be fairly dangerous to go there and to stand up, because obviously we're just facing an open field, and Russians could see us. So it's nearly impossible to bring water or food by car to the guys fighting on the zero line. That's why they use drones to send tightly wrapped bottles of water and food, hoping it will reach them. We head back to the bunker, a new run with a pounding heart for a few kilometers under the clear sky. In winter, it's gonna be worse. Those positions have to be ready before the leaves fall. Inside the dugout, Spets heads the drone unit. He has been fighting for 10 years and keeps a collection of grenade pins for each Russian killed in a drone attack. Speth's hate for the Russians is clear when he talks about once thriving cities razed to the ground.
It's very painful because it can happen to any city or settlement. The hate for them is growing more and more, so no one is going to show any mercy.
A few minutes later, the encrypted chats buzzed with bad news. The Russians shelled a nearby position. At least 4 were wounded and they need an evacuation. But the Russians are closing in, which means they'll have to wait until the enemy is cleared. Finally, it's time to get back. Basically, with the guys waiting for the armored vehicle to take us back. Now, right now, the armored vehicle is evacuating some other people. But yeah, they're gonna go back and forth. And mostly here, outgoing so far, artillery. But yeah, it's still super dangerous to go out right now. The team needs to hide in a makeshift tunnel until the APC comes.
Walking in the dark, waiting for the JB to arrive. They're a good escort. Doesn't make it less scary, but still the most dangerous point of the trip. FPVs are around, artillery. So yeah, plus we don't see anything when we walk. It's not the easiest part.
When we hear the APC, we move out and wait under the cover. The APC flies in, you stay under the cover until you hear the command. Then you jump in and take your positions. The first ones head to the back, settle in, and that's it.
Okay.
Come on. Go. Бегом. Так, я бегом. Ти? Давай.
We're going home. Nomad and his men stay behind to prepare trenches and repel the Russians for a tough winter ahead.
That's the end of that clip, but a very sobering reality of the defenses being made around Pokrovsk at this very time. But moving on from that, we also did get to see some Ukrainian artillery conducting fire missions in this area today. An older American field howitzer that was provided by one of the Baltic states. Moving on from that and further on down out of the Pokrovsk area and into Zaporizhia, we were also able to see British air defense in action, a Ukrainian AIM-132 ASRAAM anti-aircraft missile complex being used to shoot down incoming Russian drones. Once again, we have John Madden, and we can see it firing, and bam, dead on the nail. Slammed it. Amazing work by the air defense. Moving on from that, it's now time for us to move all the way down to the Kinburn Spit, where we also got to see the Ukrainians slamming the Kinburn Spit. Take a look at this. I'm going to be muting that, actually. And we can see here the night vision showing us some of the Ukrainian actions as they are preparing their drones for flight and getting them ready to head across the Dniprovsk Gulf towards the Kinburn Spit. And we now see them hitting some Russian positions along the Spit. I gotta tell y'all, this is the longest day. Like, no joke right now. I don't know about you, Matthew. You sound like you may be sleeping.
This is the longest day.
What the hell? That's not even how it went, Matthew. Man, Miss Miller and his orchestra would be ashamed.
I just remember the song, man. I just remember the song. I remember a couple of words. I remember a little bit of a tune, but the melody escapes me at the moment.
I mean, it escapes everyone as well. but still, Matthew, I see a request by Bobo Vasquez for a certain voice, Matthew, that you do quite well.
I'm telling you, when you get tired, you just need a little bit of extra slumber. Think about whales and smashing the whale carcass in Central Park. You know what I mean?
I gotta tell you, I don't know what the hell he said, but nevertheless, I gotta say, we gotta slam that whale. We gotta beat it to sleep.
Was it a whale carcass? I can't remember right now. It's slipping my memory. Was it a whale or was it something different?
The worms! The worms!
No, it wasn't worms. He hit something else.
And Davis Campbell said, "Leave Matt alone." Oh yeah, well, I mean, hell, I'm exhausted too.
Stop bullying me.
Leave me alone.
Also, what did he really hit in the park? I'm serious about that. What did he hit?
But who hit what in the park?
Remember RFK Jr.?
Oh yeah, he hit the bear.
Threw something in the park. Was it a bear? Oh, it was a bear. That's right. I see Dominic Bender said it right now. It was the bear. I went to the Central Park and I unloaded the bear from the trunk. I said, "Go, get, and go," and he got out and I hit him with the car again.
Oh, man. But anyways, a great RFK impression right there. It's a funny one. But moving on from that, we are finally moving up to Kyiv, where we have a speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 983 of the war. And so, hopefully there's no English track, and there isn't. Without further ado, here is the speech.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Сьогодні, перш за все, вдячність нашим воїнам, усім, хто захищає Україну від щоденних атак шахедів та ракет. Росія поступово нарощує цю активність і для цього досі має змогу, на жаль, використовувати західні компоненти. За жовтень місяць більш ніж 2000 шахедів було проти України, проти наших людей. Буквально кожної доби. Така кількість шахедів – це понад 170 тисяч компонентів, які мали би бути заблоковані для постачання в Росію. Мікросхеми, мікроконтролери, процесори, багато різних деталей, без яких просто був би неможливий цей терор. Все це постачається в Росію з-за кордону. І це, на жаль, від компаній з Китаю, з Європи, з Америки і багато мікровнесків у постійний російський терор. Це знов і знов повертає світ до необхідності працювати значно більше, щоб контролювати експорт. Експорт спеціальних деталей та ресурсів, щоб не давати Росії можливість обходити санкції, які давно вже були введені проти Росії за цю війну. Так само, як і з шахедами, з російськими ракетами. Вони всі містять компоненти з інших країн. Боротися проти російських ударів – це означає боротися в тому числі за силу санкцій проти Росії. Санкції мають збільшуватись, бути ефективними. І кожна схема обходу санкцій – це злочин проти людей і світу. І саме такі схеми дозволяють Росії також допомагати нарощувати м'язи режимам в Ірані та Північної Кореї. Це глобальна загроза. І тільки глобальним, спеціальним тиском можна це подолати. Сьогодні я хочу відзначити наших військових, які проявили себе найкраще в протидії шахедам. Саме цими тижнями мобільна вогнева група «Майстер» 35-ї окремої бригади морпіхів, мобільні вогневі групи «Ужик» та «Шерхан» 59-ї окремої мотопіхотної бригади, мобільна вогнева група 494 14-ї радіотехнічної бригади імені Богдана Хмельницького, також мобільні вогневі групи 513 та 631 636-го окремого зенітного кулеметного батальйону сухопутних військ, і ще мобільна вогнева група номер 9 7-ї бригади тактичної авіації. Я дякую всім вам за вашу роботу, за вашу службу, кожному, хто захищає Україну так результативно. Говорив з головкомом Сирським, доповідь по фронту, основні напрямки Рахівський, Покровський, Лиманський і всі інші. Турецький напрямок також. Дякую всім нашим воїнам за хоробрість. Кожна захищена наша позиція, кожна відновлена позиція мають значення. для всіх нас, для всього фронту. Вдячний воїнам 79-ї окремої десантно-штурмової бригади. Хлопці б'ються саме на Курахівському напрямку. Також інші напрямки на Донеччині. 38-ма окрема бригада морської піхоти. Молодці. 68-ма окрема єгерська бригада. Дякую вам, воїни. Оріхівський напрямок. Дякую всім воїнам 128-ї окремої гірсько-штурмової та 141-ї окремої піхотної бригади. Також Придніпровський напрямок, 124-та та 126-та окремі бригади ТРО. Дякую. Слава усім, хто воює заради України, усім, хто працює заради нашої держави, заради всіх наших людей. Дякую кожному у світі, хто допомагає, дійсно допомагає нам захищати право, наше право, українське право і кожного народу на своє власне життя. Слава Україні!
Rum slava. And on that note, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and that is moving us on into the second segment of this stream where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And it's going to be an incredibly fun segment. We might be tired, we might be sleepy, but we're going to stick it out. Right, Matthew?
Hello?
Matthew will not be here beyond the poll. He's actually exhausted, quite tired. I am as well, but he actually has to get up extremely early tomorrow. I do not. By the heavens.
Also, I've been up an extra 3 hours or so, man. Not the extra 3.
Man, but you got to sleep like by 3 extra hours. Like you kind of level out. Like to be entirely honest, you know what I mean? But nevertheless, we are going to get into this poll, and then after that, and only after that, Matthew will leave for the night. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night, we have our last poll to address, and this one says, Zelensky says the USA must allow him to strike Russian long range to stop North Korean troops. And what are your thoughts? 79%, the overwhelming majority, said that is needed for proper defense. While 7% were unsure, 6% said I need more intel on the troops, and 9% said that's not necessary to defend. And obviously, it goes without saying that is necessary to defend his country. He needs to be able to strike into Russia long range, for not just to stop the North Korean troops, but to also stop the Russians from using their long-range strategic bombers on Ukrainian territory. Zelensky can't hit those bases without being allowed to strike long range, and right now, the U.S. is holding him up from doing that, and they've been doing it for months. They've been holding him up for several months, and he cannot hit those bases. So, and once again, it's stopping him from hitting those bombers, and it's also stopping him from hitting the North Korean troops. So, I'm with the 79% all the way. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. They should provide they should provide Ukraine with long-range strike abilities. I believe that is a necessity at this point, and we have also covered that in great length for months at this point. But I hope that does address that well, and it is time for Matthew to sleep. And so, good night to Matthew. Sleep well, and I'll see you tomorrow, champ. You take care.
And I'll tell you what, folks, once again, thank you all for another great stream tonight. I'm going to turn it over to the Enforcer. He has the spreadsheet that's been nicely curated all night with your questions and super chats in it. And I will see you all tomorrow night on the stream as well. And also, of course, on the Twitter page. And also, if you have not, like the Enforcer's been saying, check out those Enforcer shirts because they're about to go off the store in just a moment. So once again, thank you all once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow. And good night to you all.
And of course, a big night to Enforcer Matt, and we will be carrying on the stream alone. We will fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the hills, we shall fight on the beaches, and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills. And if our empire, or large part of it, is subjugated and starving, then our great empire from beyond the seas shall carry us forward to victory, if we have to do it together, if we have to do it alone. But getting through that whole thing, that was literally just to say, I'm running this thing on my own from this point forward. But still, with that, it is time for us to move on into those questions. And also, by the way, everyone, I do want to say this really quickly. I am absolutely exhausted, bushed, beat, whatever you want to say. I am exhausted, and I do want to make sure to address every single super chat as best as I can. With that in mind, however, I would highly advise that if you want a good statement to your super chat, honestly, I would wait till tomorrow. I'm very tired right now, extremely tired. I only got 4 hours of sleep today, and I'm just absolutely worn out because I've also been doing a lot in the background with the orchestra and everything today as well. So I do want to make sure to get to all of the super chats. Well, I know I can get to all the ones that we have in the spreadsheet right now and get to all of them and give them enough time and attention. But if we have loads more super chats that come in, I probably will start to I'm going to wear out, and I will not be able to address them that well. So if you do want to support the channel, I want to make sure that we give you all the time and the credit and the attention that each one of y'all deserves, and the thanks as well. And I feel like that would be done a lot better tomorrow. So while I'm not saying do not throw in a super chat, I highly encourage y'all, if y'all want to throw one in tonight, to try and throw one in tomorrow instead, and just hold off on tonight. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Once again, that's not something that's going to be like enforced, like we're not having a cutoff at this point. I just encourage y'all, if y'all really want a good answer or a statement made to your super chat, probably wait till tomorrow. But with that, we are going to be moving on into those questions. And the first one that we have right now is from GunFox61. Hey, and the color's not changing. Hey, and it finally changed. Hey, hallelujah, baby. But nevertheless, GunFox61 threw in a day in history. And the days in history are always amazing. 1889, North Dakota is made the 39th state. And North Dakota is a very interesting state, actually, GunFox61. I think that North Dakota is a very slept-on state, because it's just neat. Like, I can't explain it right now because I think I'm too exhausted to. But North Dakota is incredibly cool. Also, the Black Hills National Forest in South Dakota is also really cool as well. But I digress. They're just neat. They're neat all around. But nevertheless, moving on from that, in 1885, Harlow Shapley, astronomer who discovered the sun, is not at the center of the galaxy. And that is actually a pretty cool one as well, because up until then, they actually thought the sun was the center of the galaxy. Generally, everyone thought that the Earth and the sun was the center of everything, because they didn't really have any perspective to show them otherwise, and then we learned, and we finally found out. 1841, the Second Afghan War begins. That is true. That one actually, I believe, was a disaster, if I remember correctly. The Third Afghan War, I think, was the successful one. And in 1570, a tidal wave in the North Sea destroys the seawalls from Holland to Jutland. And that's actually a pretty interesting one as well, considering that Jutland is so famously known for the Battle of Jutland. But still, I think also the plan is dying brought up a good point. Tomorrow is a Sunday night fundraiser, and so that means you cannot super chat tomorrow. That would go to a fundraiser and help out a nonprofit. So if you want to throw in a super chat and have it addressed well, please make sure to throw it in on Tuesday, this next Tuesday, because that will be the next time this channel is able to accept super chats that help the channel, and I'll be able to make sure to address them incredibly well by that point. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you for bringing that up. But nevertheless, big thanks to you once again for the massive support, GunFox61, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And the next one is a 50 from John Person. Hey, and he is a person. And John Person said, if you book a visit to the Soaring Colorado Zipline Tour, you'll get a private car on the Durango-Silverton train both ways. Thank you so much for your hard work delivering the news each day, and LSA. And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for giving me that little tidbit. I really do want to visit the Durango and Silverton Railroad one day, which is pretty much just the Denver and Rio Grande's narrow-gauge trains that kind of exist nowadays. But I really do want to visit it because I just think it is one of the coolest heritage narrow-gauge railways that still exists in America. It's probably the most photographed and probably the most photogenic as well. It's just cool. And let me go see. Let's see here. Yeah, we can go down here. Let me see if I can show y'all some of the pictures that we have here of the Durango and Silverton. I've shown these a good bit, but I just cannot not show these because I just love them a great deal. And I just think they're wonderful. I think they're incredible. The scenery is amazing. It's absolutely beautiful. Also, I wouldn't drink water out of that creek because all the rocks are yellow and it looks like it's filled with sulfur. But I don't know. Maybe it's not. Like, the locals, let me know. Like, am I right? Is that actually like a sulfur, like, river or something? Like, with a lot of sulfur in it? Is it drinkable or is it not? But still, this thing is absolutely cool. I just love it. That's actually a video. But I just think it's the coolest railroad. So thank you for sharing that, because if I ever go out there, I'm going to get the little zip line thing. I've never rode a zip line before, I don't think. Like, I can't remember that off the top of my head right now. But if I can get a private car on the Durango and Silverton Railroad, that would be cool. Also, do they run like daily? Let me go pull that up. I don't know if they run like daily services at the Durango and Silverton, which would be interesting if they did. That would show that they have a pretty good amount of traffic and they're fairly profitable. But let's see if they do. So here's the Durango and Silverton website, and all aboard the Durango and Silverton narrow gauge railroad. Book now, ride with us. Do they have a timetable? Events, packages, tour packages, ride with us. Now booking, classes of service, charters. See about us. Oh, you can get a job there. Do they have like open jobs to be like an engineer or something like that? Interesting. So you can actually apply for a job. I would be interested in that if I was in the area. Apparently you can get paid. I thought it was kind of like a volunteer railroad thing, but dang, I'm telling you what, folks, I can't find a freaking timetable, and I hate that. I'm assuming that they have a pretty packed schedule. It looks like they have a lot. So let's see, like if we click here on now booking, so November 22nd to January 4th, dang, that's a pretty long run time from November 22nd to May 2nd. Wait a minute, so if we go to that one, oh my lord, dang, it's like every day of the week. Well, not every day of the week, it's only like the weekends. So I mean, still, that's a lot, though, for, like, a older, like, heritage railroad, because it costs a good amount of money to keep these things running, especially considering that the fuel resources that a lot of these trains ran on doesn't really exist anymore. Most of these actually ran on coal at the beginning of their running history, but as as all the coal mines in the area shut down, it became pretty much financially infeasible to run these locomotives on coal any longer, so they converted all of them to being oil burners. So that's also why you don't really see a lot of smoke coming out of the smokestack anymore, is because you can pretty much tune these things to where the oil burns very clean, where there's no exhaust at all, really, to visibly be seen. But still, it is pretty cool. And let me see if I can find another picture. Another cool one. They do have an operating turntable, turnstile, and a roundhouse, which is really nice. But I'm trying to see if I can find y'all some more pictures of the scenery. Yeah, here's another one. I mean, it's just a beautiful place out there. And I think that it would be just an incredible thing to go see and do one day. There's a lot I want to see out in Colorado, to be entirely honest, with like the heritage railroads. It's some of the prettiest heritage railroad areas in the country. Like the other one I want to see is the Canyon City. Where the hell is it? It's further up, isn't it? Yeah, it's up here. Where though? There we go. The Canyon City, what the hell is it called? I know, Rural Gorge Route Railroad. This is also one I want to go on. It has an F7, which is just cool. I like them. It's also well kept. Like, the whole entire thing is well kept. Like, look at the inside of these coaches. Like, this is a very well kept heritage railroad. And it travels down the old Denver and Rio Grande route that traveled through Royal Gorge, which is where an actual battle happened in between, I think it was the Denver and Rio Grande and the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, if I remember correctly, which is pretty cool in itself. But still, thank you so much once again for support, and I thank you for sharing that bit of information with me, John Person, because I will be making sure to take advantage of that info when I go out there, hopefully in the future. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are moving on to the next one. And the next one goes to Alan Orchard, who threw in a 20, but did not throw in a comment. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one, which are actually the rest of the days in history from Gunfox61. Gunfox61 threw in two $20 donations, totaling $48. $3 altogether. And Gunfox61 said 2000. First resident crew arrives at the ISS. In 1943, the Battle of Empress Augusta Bay and Bougainville ends in U.S. Navy victory over Japan. In 1923, U.S. Navy aviator H.J. Brown sets the new world speed record. 1942, Lieutenant General Dwight D. Eisenhower arrives in Gibraltar to set up an American command post for the invasion of North Africa. In 1914, Russia declared war on the Ottoman Empire. And take a question from the chat. And in 1889, South Dakota is made the 40th state in the United States of America. And I gotta say, oh, wait a minute. Oh my lord, y'all. I'm so sorry. You're right, Juana McIntosh. We're not having a stream on Tuesday. It's election day. I don't think I even told y'all that tonight. We told y'all that last night. Y'all can tell how tired I am. We are not running a stream on Tuesday. The next time y'all can super chat the channel will be Wednesday, because we are not running a stream on election night. Most everyone's going to be looking at the election results. It would be absolute political chaos here in the live chat. We are not running a stream on election night. So make sure to just take the day off, pay attention to what's going on in other categories, or if you don't like to, just watch a rerun, and then we'll be back on Wednesday. Thank you for bringing that up, Juana McIntosh, because I was going to completely forget about that. So let me make sure to clarify that for everyone. There will be no stream on Tuesday. We are not running a stream on Tuesday. It's the election. We're just not going to be here. We'll be around, but we're not going to be running a stream. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, thank you once again for the massive support, Gunfox61, and throwing in some very interesting days in history. Because, well, actually, a day in history, because that is incredibly cool to know that all of those things happened on these very days. Well, this very day right here. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. And we will make sure to take a live chat. And the live chat goes to Melanie16040. And Melanie16040 said, did they tell you where the LSA 155mm shell was fired at, or only the video of it being fired? They never told us what the shell was being fired at. It could have been fired at nothing. It could have been at a training range, or it could have been in a real-life frontline area. We don't really know, because the guy who went and had that video made for us did it for free. Like, he just liked the channel and was a part of the artillery crew that was, you know, firing those shells. So he asked us what we wanted on the shell. We told him, and he fired it, and we didn't want to ask a lot of questions because the guy did it absolutely free. We weren't going to be like, hey, look, that shell isn't a good shell because it wasn't fired at the Russians. We were like, hey, it's whatever. Like, if it was a training range or if it was actually fired at Russians, we were just happy to have it. So that's my answer. We have no clue. Like, it may have been fired at someone, or it may have been fired at nothing. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one, which is a $20 super chat from John Garner. And John Garner threw in a 20, but did not throw in a comment. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support, John Garner, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we are on to the next one, which is a 20 from Matthew James. And Matthew James said, I really love the different voice impersonating you do of different people, especially of political figures. But there is one female election candidate I haven't heard yet, and I would love to hear it. And I thank you so much for the support. I thank you for enjoying the voice impersonations, Matthew James. We put well, we don't put a lot of effort into them. I just think I'm kind of like decent a little bit at doing voices. But the reason why you've never heard that one is because I've done it off stream, and it never comes out good because my voice is a very low pitched one, and it's very monotone at its natural level. You know, y'all are kind of hearing how I normally talk right now. And it's very hard for me to do female voices. It's pretty much impossible for me to do female voices. So that pretty much means that they get to avoid the absolute joke gauntlet that we throw on everyone else because I can't really do a female voice that well. So that's why you've never heard an impersonation of that person. I want to make that very clear. It's not that like I feel like they're untouchable and I can't joke about them. I would 100% joke about them if I could, but there's no way I can actually do that voice where people wouldn't know who I'm doing. And that's kind of the issue with that one. That's why we never do it on stream. Because the best I can do is go, I like to read, and that's about it. Like, and that doesn't even sound like her, you know, and that's kind of the issue with that one. I would love to do it though, because there is plenty of content to make jokes about on that person like there is on everyone else that we do. Like with, I caught a whale, and I gotta tell you, you gotta reopen the warp, you gotta bring back Zinch, you know, you could do that. Or, oh, Jack. Like, we have jokes on every single one of those people till the sun goes down. Like every day we can come up with new stuff on them. And I can come up with new stuff on that person too, on the specific person you're talking about. Problem is, I just cannot do that voice. Like, I just cannot. My voice just does not have the range or the ability. And I think if I did, my vocal cords would snap. So I got to say, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But sadly, that is my answer to that right now, Matthew James. I may work on that in the background a little bit. To be entirely honest, I think 2 of the voices are going to go to the wayside after this this whole election comes around. Like, like some voices are just going to disappear because some of these people, like, no matter how it goes, at least 2 people are not going to ever really be done on this channel again, because they're never going to be people who are in the public sphere anymore. Like one of the candidates, like, I caught a whale. He's never going to be around again because, the only reason we're bringing him up and kidding about him is because he was a bit of a figure in the election, and it's coming around, so he's kind of a funny guy to make fun of. And then, one of the candidates is going to lose, and whichever candidate loses, there's really not a lot of subject matter to make voices on them anymore because they're not really going to be doing a lot in the public sphere for us to be able to make jokes about. So, sadly, like 2 of those voices are going to be retired for the large part. Like, we could pull them out here and there, but there won't really be like the recency about them to really make good jokes that would land. You know what I mean? It just kind of loses, like Adam Glegg said, it kind of loses its comedic timing once the election is coming past. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for support, though, Matthew James, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because who knows? That's also why I'm saying that about, like, working on that voice. I don't really know who's going to win. Like, I don't really care to, like, guess, and it doesn't really matter. Someone's going to win. It may be that person. It may not be that person. And if it isn't that person, I will have spent, like, 3 days working on a voice I'll probably never use. And if they do win, then I guess I kind of got, like, a 3-day head start, I suppose. And because I'll be doing that voice a good deal, because then they'll be around. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 20 from LNM Send It. And LMN Send It said, take a question from the chat. And I guess they're sending it straight to the chat. But I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And I got to thank you so much once again for wanting to help this channel, support it, and help it to keep on running. And we will make sure to take a live chat. And the live chat goes to The Bunch. And The Bunch said, is Brazil acting on the territorial encroachment by Venezuela into Guyana? Do you think this may become another theater of conflict in the near future? I'll be honest with you, if that's happening, I haven't heard anything about it. It's been on such a low level. No one's really bringing it up, and so I would not know at the moment. I'd largely have to declare ignorance on that one. It's a good question, though, but it just isn't a serious enough situation for it to register on our radar. I guess that's a good way for me to put it. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And the next one is, let me see here, a 20 from Twister Wives. And Twister Wives threw in a 20 and said, I finally get to watch the stream live, and I will say forever, and please take a question from the chat. And welcome to the live stream. I'm sorry that you had to join it when I only got 4 hours of sleep, and Matthew got about 4 hours too, and so he got off and got to sleep. He was very fortunate with that. I don't, because I have to keep this thing running no matter what. I have to be here. But I do thank you so much for the support. I wish I could get some sleep, but I still thank you for being here, and I hope you've been enjoying the stream so far tonight, and that the news delivery was still pretty good. Like, I'm hoping that it was, because it would be very unfortunate if people were like, man, this is kind of a lackluster night. But still, I thank you so much once again, and I thank you for being here live. And we will make sure to take one from the live chat. And this one goes to James Hembree. And James Hembree said, how long can these already hungry countries sustain a long war? And that is a great question. These countries can sustain a war for just about as long as they can stretch their manpower and resources. Hypothetically, this war could go on forever. This could go on for 40 years and still be going on in the future. But with the amount of resources they're both expending, we're assuming that it's only a few years. At the longest. And so a few years. I can't give an exact amount of time because every single time we tried to crystal ball that on this channel, it has been wrong, and I don't want to try and throw out another one that will be wrong again, because they're all going to be wrong. It's very hard to predict the exact end of a war and when it will happen, but it probably will be within a few years. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support, Twister Wives, and sponsoring a live chat and helping us to keep this thing running. And we also have a 15 from Hayden Battle League. And Hayden Battle League said, "Hello, Enforcers. You should do a comparison video of the events that led up to World War I and World War II and compare it to current events that show we are on the same path to another major international conflict." We could do something like that. That actually would be an interesting idea. The problem is that creating a long-form documentary video has ended up being a lot more difficult than one would assume. To explain a little bit of what's going on in the background, because the China-Taiwan video, as many of y'all will know, is right on the cusp of being released, and it has been that way for like 8 months. And the reason why is because I now have to try and film the in-person segments, and we have moved to Enforcer Studio 2.0. And Enforcer Studio 2.0 does not necessarily have the space, at least in my office, to set up a nice little backdrop and film an in-person segment. And so for that reason, I have to try and find a way to either film that in person or find a substitute to do that, fill in those segments, and then put it out. The other thing as well is that video editors can be a little interesting. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to go into that much more. But there's a certain thing that I'm just like, I'm not really sure if I want to put that part out because it's not polished enough. But beyond that, though, I will say that as far as that goes, I would love to make a video like that. It's just very hard to do something like that and actually make it well produced. And I know that everyone always says, "Oh, we just be happy to hear it," even if it isn't really well produced on like the video side. It's really just audio. I don't like that though. Like, I really do want to make good documentaries. Like, I watch other people's stuff, like other people's videos, all over YouTube. And recently I've been watching some YouTubers who do like the exploring side of things, and I really have been leaning heavily into this one YouTube channel called Part-Time Explorer, who does amazing stuff on exploring like abandoned sites or talking about wrecks of ships or crashes, really just going to these places and seeing if they can find any proof or any evidence of what happened and what they're talking about. And it's so well made. Like, I have to say that about this guy. He makes amazing documentaries on the stuff he's talking about. They're well researched and the videos are really well put together. Like, the cinematography is great. The little additional I guess you say video editing that's done, it's incredible stuff. And I just find it to be like a good example. Like, and another channel that's really good is Ocean Liner Designs or Brick and Mortar. All of them do really great stuff. And I just love it. And I'm like, I wish we could do something like that, but in our own sphere, like the stuff we talk about. And that's the issue, is that getting that kind of infrastructure, like a video editor, is very hard. And it's a difficult thing because, one, there's just like, I find it really hard to explain because I also don't want to say like anything really bad, but it's tough. It's a lot tougher than one would imagine because I'll be honest, I don't think we found the right deck of cards, I guess you could say, to play to make good videos like that. And also on top of that, we don't really have a lot of time. And also, let's see here, 1 second. There we go. We don't really have a lot of time to make stuff like that that's additional because the short war videos that happen in the middle of the day happen whenever they have to happen. Like, whenever there's news that comes out, we have to make one. And then the streams take up a lot of time in themselves because I spend about 3.5 hours on air every single night, and then about that same amount of time or even more just making this news possible for the night so we can run a show. So already I'm working about a 7 to 8 hour day just running the stream, and then if there's ever a short war video to be made, I'm adding about an additional 3 hours, so then I'm working about 11 hours a day. And so there's not a lot of extra time to throw into a documentary project or anything like that. I wish there was, though. Like, I wish we could streamline some of the stuff and just make it really easy to do so that way I could start doing more stuff. Because like this kind of sounds like a whole litany list of complaints, and it really is, but I want to try and streamline it to where we can do more stuff. It's just hard to do that though, and it drives me crazy because I've been wanting to do documentary stuff. We have a documentary; it's literally done. It's just sitting there, and it needs the in-person segments filmed. And I still cannot find a way or the time to get those in-person segments filmed and get this all put together so that we can be put out, and then start doing that in a mass-produced way. And also, once again, getting back into kind of like the irregularity of the weekly schedule, especially in the middle of the day before we get into the later part of the night. The problem with making short war videos is that for us to make short war videos on good news days, that just happens whenever it happens. It's a very irrational kind of a thing with how that will work. Like, you could have a straight week of videos, and then there's like 3 or 4 days, like right now, where there is really not enough news in the middle of the day to be able to make a standalone video. And then during that time, we could spend that time working on documentaries, but we do not have the consistent levels of free time weekly to pump out documentaries on a prototypical basis where YouTube will favor it in the algorithms where it actually gets views. And then that's the other thing, just not to hash all of this out with y'all, but just to let y'all know a little bit of why it's tough to make videos like that. The other thing is budgeting. It's not cheap to make videos like that, especially with a lot of video editing. And it's tough. It's so tough because it costs for the China-Taiwan video, just to give you all a little bit of a background on the budgeting for that, it costs $1,400 to just have it edited. Like, for the video editor to make the stuff, it costs $1,400. So those videos actually have to be not really like the normal way we do things, where it's just free to watch and it's whatever, people can support it or not. Those pretty much have to have backers for us to just break even on those things. Like, we have to maybe find a sponsor, or we have to find a way to at least break even on the video, because they're expensive to produce, and we're going to start running into negatives, and we won't be able to make a lot of them. And that's kind of also one of the issues as well with those, is that to make them good, we have to be able to start monetizing those videos legitimately, and that also starts to become a bit of an issue as well. So that's kind of like all of the problems, kind of all the roadblocks that we're running into right now. But we're hoping that we can get those cleared out eventually, or streamline a lot of the stuff in the background, to the point that we do have time consistently to start working on stuff like that, because I'd love to. To be entirely honest with you, even just trying to get the Armed Forces medley put together that we've been working on, I've been working on for a couple of months now, it's even hard to find time to do that. And coming around on the 14th of November, I have to find time to be able to do that, regardless of when that time is. We may actually have to cancel the stream that day, because I have to sit in with the orchestra that day on a Zoom call and actually make sure that it's what I like, and then they make their final recording, and then we'll be putting that in the intro. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for support, Hayden Battle League. And I love the idea. That would be a great idea. But I also don't want to say yes we will, and then you're waiting for months and it doesn't come out and you don't know why. I want to explain why there is a bit of a roadblock with those kinds of ideas. But I absolutely love it, and I would love to do something like that. It's just that we got to figure out the way to do it. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And also, 420 said, "This is your job now." Yeah, I mean, it is my job. This has been my job for 3 years now. But that's also a bit of the problem. That's really the big problem, is that this is my job, making this nightly news stream and the midday news, and that takes up enough time as it is. I'm putting 60 to 80 hours a weekend easily on this thing, just normally. And then if there's anything extremely crazy going on, say on a usual Iran-Israel week, where that's really going off, I could end up working almost 90 hours that week, or 100 hours that week. That was actually what happened when that took off. I was literally sitting around all day just doing this. There was no free time at all. And the only time I got free time was to go eat something for 20 or 30 minutes. And then I'd come right back and just sit here and just watch news all day. Well, not watch news, but, go look at news feeds and just to look for any tremors in the Middle East. Then that takes loads of time. And that's what really starts to also dig into being able to do other projects. I want to do them, though. I want y'all to know I want to do those projects. And eventually I hope that we can. But I just don't know if we can right now. I've still got to try and find a way to streamline a lot of stuff. But then there's issues with that. And so it's there's not to literally go down every single contingency, but there are issues with that as well, because back in the very beginning of the channel, I did want to try and just create more free time, to just have free time so I didn't get burnt out. So back before the first Great Schism in the Discord server, some of the moderators then did offer to get news for me, but the problem is I didn't get to review the news before it went up, so I didn't really know a lot about what the news was even on, and sometimes the news was not up to my spec. Like, there are a lot of stories and a lot of clips that don't make it onto this map. We can only put about 30 of them on every night because we only have about enough time in 2 hours to cover about 30 clips, and so they have to be well curated. They have to be the big points of the day, and they have to be able to make a story when you put them all together. And that's a big thing. That takes a lot of time to categorize that and put it all together. And then when you don't, when you streamline that and you just get rid of a lot of that pre-show prep time, you give it off to other people, you don't really know if the quality is there when it finally gets to you. And then you have to run a show on news that might not be coherent, might not have a story, and it might just be fodder. And that's not at all what I'm into either, because I want to make sure that everything we do has a good amount of quality to it. So then there's also an issue with streamlining that. And so I hope that does address that all fairly well, at least the best I can. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Hayden Battle League. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $14 super chat from Cypress96. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support is greatly appreciated. And I thank you so much once again. And with that, we got a 10 actually from Eva Hallenberg with no comment. And I thank you once again for the support as well, because you help us to be able to make this thing possible and keep it running. And so a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 12 from Ambi Pamby. And Ambi Pamby said, finally yesterday, Enforcer Matt called me a long-time legend for the first time. Though I've been lurking close to 2.5 years since lurking was considered a bit creepy, luckily it's all cool now. And I thank you so much for the support, Ambi Pamby, and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And I got to thank you so much once again. You are a channel legend. You've been around for an incredibly long time, and I can't believe that was the first time we called you that. I think we've called you that before, but if that was the first time we called you, I'm sorry it took us that long, because you have been a channel legend for a good minute. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $10 super chat from Cookie. And Cookie said, when will the U.S. and NATO fight against Russia and North Korea and Ukraine? They are both doing nothing. Probably they will never fight against the Russians and North Koreans in Ukraine unless if it turned into a greater European conflict, which may never happen, to be entirely honest. So the chances of that happening are honestly a bit slim. But with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $10 super chat from Quantum Fighter. And Quantum Fighter said, let's see. Let's see, I don't know what that's about, Quantum Fighter. I'm not really sure if YouTube would allow us to read something off like that. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping us to keep this channel running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And moving on from that, we have a 10 from Tom Exman. And Tom Exman said, let's give the guys a super chat. It might be 4 days until the next chance. Oh no, Tom Exman. It's perfectly fine. I don't want people throwing in a lot of super chats tonight, and also I don't want anyone to ever feel compelled to do that, but I really don't want people to throw in a lot of super chats tonight, because I'll be honest with y'all, I am absolutely bushed right now, and I really do want to start trying to get towards getting to sleep, so that way I can try and catch up and be at full energy for tomorrow. I know Matthew's not going to be, because he's got a lot he's doing right now, but I know I have to be, because if anything, if the channel counts on anything, at least the show counts on anything, it counts on, like, me. Like, I have to be here, because if I'm not here and I'm not at 100%, this show will not run. Like, that is a guarantee. Because, like, even right now, I'm here. Like, you know, like, I'm the one who has to make sure that this thing keeps rolling, so I have to make sure to get some sleep, so that way the Sunday night fundraiser hopefully goes well tomorrow. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, though. I thank you massively for that. And with that, we have a $10 super chat from Adam McLean. And Adam McLean said, this is a super great live stream. And I thank you so much for saying that it's a super great live stream, because I think that you're a super great viewer. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which goes to a $8 super chat from Angry Drunk Bumblebees. And Angry Drunk Bumblebee said, wouldn't it be cool if we produced our own calendar? I'm thinking HIMARS, tank popping, refineries on fire, sunken ships and subs, etc. And I think that would be pretty cool. And I have to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And I think it would be cool to see an American calendar. Honestly, what I was thinking of doing is actually having custom art made for the LSA. I thought that would be pretty cool. But we have to kind of get some ideas for that. And also, like I'm saying on everything, we have to find the time. Because there's not really a lot of time behind the scenes. But still, thank you so much once again for support, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are moving on to the next one, which is an absolute whopper. And it is a $100 super chat from Richard Hawkins. The 10th super chat Richard Hawkins has thrown in on this channel. And Richard Hawkins said, Slava Ukraini and LSA forever. And long live the Lee Spring Army, Richard Hawkins. And thank you so much for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And I got to thank someone like you so much once again for making this channel a reality and making it a possibility, because if it wasn't for folks like you who supported this channel, we wouldn't be able to be here right now covering the news that we've been covering for about 1,000 days at this point. And so with that, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $5 super chat from Asiopfa. And Asiopfa said thanks. And thank you so much for the support, Asiopfa. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. And moving on from that, we have a $5 super chat from Scott. And Scott said, great show tonight. Matt, can you tell everyone in the LSA why you and the Enforcer decided to move away from Birmingham? And an RFK Jr. voice. We actually have not moved away from Birmingham. We are still in Birmingham. Enforcer HQ 2.0 is still in Birmingham. It's just in a different location. Generally, because of doxing. That's kind of a part of it. You know, there's a little bit in the background that went on with that generally made us feel unsafe. To put that lightly. And also there was a couple of other things that happened in the background as well, and we had to end up moving Enforcer HQ 2.0 to, Enforcer HQ to a new location, hence the 2.0. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a 5 from Peter Falk. And Peter Falk said, China will take Taiwan. I'm convinced Russia and Iran are pushing the U.S. in a long game. It's been like this for a long time, but nobody talks about it anymore. I'm not really sure if China would take Taiwan, at least here in the near future, maybe within the next 6 or 7 years. That's a real likelihood. But for now, I think it still is kind of a bit on the, cool down. Well, it's the tensions are rising, but still it's not going to happen, at least in my opinion. I just don't see the prerequisite requirements for that. And so I would say, let's see here, 1 second, there we go. So I would say that's maybe my best analysis on that, but there certainly is a bit of a united front in some forms to work against the Western sphere in the United States. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one, which is a 2 from Philip Fix's LSA. And Philip Fix's LSA said, it's Ghost Rider, not Hell Rider. And Slava the LSA, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you for correcting that, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can. The best I can indeed. And with that, we are on to the next one, which is a $2 super chat from High C King. Hey, welcome back, High C King. And High C King said, whoop, whoop, and whoop, whoop, back to you. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, that is our last super chat of the night. Once again, a big shout out to everyone who supported the channel tonight. A big shout out to everyone who's been watching so far tonight. But on that note, I want to make sure to round out this stream by the top of the hour, so that way I can hopefully start trying to get towards getting a little bit of sleep. And so we are going to be addressing the Morse code and the Morse code decoders of the night, which goes to Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Renew, Kevin J., Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Her Royal Fluffiness, and Arabella Garbo. And all of them said, the Morse code for today reads, Israel pulled out a small D-Day to grab a few people. They must be higher value, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And And that is the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all for the correct Morse code deciphering. It is absolutely incredible to know that y'all were able to get that correct again, and I got to congratulate y'all for that. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night, which goes to little Gooba. And Gooba said, what will be the tipping point for the United States to fully declare war on Iran? Probably an offensive action that's too large to ignore against American forces in the region, or a very large action that would actually cripple or greatly damage the state of Israel. Those two things would probably lead us to conduct preemptive action against the state of Iran, or the Islamic Republic of Iran, as it's officially called. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we are on to the second to last question tonight, which goes to Little Bear. And Little Bear said, the Atlas CCV is being made by Kent, and Bay is a remote auto drone. How many like this are out there? Not that many at the moment. This is still kind of in a testing and development phase, so it most likely will start to be mass-produced and put into large amounts of field service probably within the next 2 years, but it's kind of just in its introductory phases at this point. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And the final question of the night, the lucky last question of the night goes to Dean Hooper. And Dean Hooper said, did USA send another carrier battle group to the Middle East recently? Not that I've heard of. I think there's only one in the area. And I'm not really sure which one it is. I think it may actually be the Teddy Roosevelt aircraft carrier group, although there is also a Teddy Roosevelt that's an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. I think that's the only one in the area right now from what I recall, but I don't think there's a second one there, and I don't think second one has been moved there recently since the last time Iran attacked Israel, I think back in April or so. But still, with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream just a few minutes before the top of the hour. I've got to thank every single one of y'all once again for watching. At the peak tonight, we had about 10.5 thousand people here, and over the length of the stream, we've had about 86,000 people who have watched it. We are, of course, honored and grateful to have had every single one of y'all here so far tonight, and if y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe, make sure to hit the like button, and make sure to just do whatever the hell you want. I mean, we would love to just see you all around. I'm so tired I can't really think about the outro, but still, also one more thing, if you do want to get a t-shirt from officialenforcesstore.com, make sure to get the Make Russia Small Again t-shirt. Literally, the shirt's about to be taken off the store here in probably just the next hour, so please make sure to go down to the link in the description below and get one if you want one, because this will be the last day that this limited edition run is on the store. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and also to run the Sunday night fundraiser. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards